Chapter 1480. After a long while, the white light that engulfed the arena finally dissipated. Xueqi's figure appeared and everyone could see his situation clearly. His snow-white robe had become a pile of rags and there was a huge hole in his chest. There was even bloodstains on it. His face was getting paler and paler and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His breathing was also getting messy. "You brat. You are really cruel. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have held back." Xueqi stared at Ji Tianqing angrily. As he spoke, he opened up the yin-yang umbrella and covered half of his body. Then, with a flash of white light, he changed out of his tattered robe and put on a luxurious white robe. He looked at Ji Tianqing coldly and activated the power of the yin-yang umbrella. He said in a low voice, "Brat, I won't hold back anymore." Obviously, Xueqi was infuriated after losing twice and being injured by Ji Tianqing in front of everyone. However, Ji Tianqing's expression was still indifferent and his eyes were calm. He did not react to his words at all. Before Xueqi could attack, he waved the Burial of Heaven and slashed out with all his might. Swing! With a swing of the Burial of Heaven, 1,000-feet-long crescent-shaped sword light slashed towards Xueqi with a destructive force. Xueqi formed a spell with his hands and controlled the yin-yang umbrella to become 1,000 feet wide, blocking the sky in front of him. Pang! The crescent-shaped sword light slashed onto the yin-yang umbrella and a loud sound was heard. The sword light shattered on the spot but the yin-yang umbrella was unharmed. It spun quickly and flashed with a blinding white light. Without waiting for Ji Tianqing to attack again, Xueqi had already formed a hand seal and used his trump card. Yin-yang sky suppressing. As he shouted coldly, the yin-yang umbrella lit up with a half-black and half-white light and started to spin quickly. The black and white light formed a 1,000-feet-wide ball of light. It spun quickly like a wheel, just like the yin-yang fish. Under Xueqi's control, the black and white disc released a terrifying suppressive power that enveloped Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing frowned when he sensed the formless suppressive energy that was like a mountain pressing down on him. He also activated his vast and mighty dermic powers, and his body violently expanded to a height of 10 feet, turning him into a majestic giant. Then, he held the enlarged sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and slashed at the yin-yang wheel with all his might. He wanted to break through the invisible power that was suppressing heaven and earth. Heaven-cleaving sword. The 1,000-meter-long golden sword seemed to be able to split the heavens and the earth. It broke through the invisible suppressive force and slashed at the yin-yang wheel. With a loud boom, the gigantic sword collapsed on the spot, turning into fragments that scattered all over the sky. However, the yin-yang wheel was not damaged at all. It continued to spin, releasing the invisible power of yin and yang to suppress Ji Tianqing. Since the first move failed, Ji Tianqing immediately used a second move. Big Dipper Sword. He held the sword of Burial of Heaven in his hand and instantly stabbed out 7 dazzling sword lights that pierced towards 7 different positions on the yin-yang wheel. This sword technique was even more powerful, and the mysteries it contained were even more profound. Bang bang bang. However, the 7 sword lights all pierced the yin-yang wheel, causing a series of loud sounds to ring out before exploding. The yin-yang wheel shook violently dozens of times, and it flashed with black and white light, but it did not stop spinning. Xueqi's face became even paler, and his breathing became even more chaotic. However, he gritted his teeth and continued to release even more dermic powers to increase the power of the yin-yang wheel. Ji Tianqing frowned, and his expression became even more serious. He thought to himself, "This Xueqi is indeed stronger than Guanglong. He is indeed worthy of being called a genius of the Shenwu continent." Although Lu Yin was confident that he could defeat Xueqi, he had to admit that Xueqi was indeed very strong. The formless yin and yang forces suppressed him, making it difficult for him to move. His waist became bent, and his bones emitted crisp cracking sounds. If not for the fact that he had cultivated the galaxy body refinement art and had tempered his body to the extreme, he would not have been able to withstand the yin-yang wheel suppression. Xueqi tried his best to resist the suppression of the yin and yang forces. He held the sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and raised it above his head. His essence, qi, and soul merged as he unleashed his most powerful attack. Sky-splitting sword. A 3-kilometer-long blazing white sword appeared, and it carried with it a destructive might as it slashed towards the yin-yang wheel. At that moment, the white light illuminated half the sky, completely covering the scorching sun high up in the sky. The hundreds of thousands of people in the plaza were unable to open their eyes because of the blinding white light. Boom, crack. Following an earth-shattering explosion, the 3-kilometer-long blazing white sword instantly shattered. Endless fragments of white light burst forth in the sky, like white snow filling the sky. The giant yin-yang wheel was also shattered on the spot, exploding into dozens of fragments. The yin-yang umbrella returned to its original form, flashing with white light. It was thrown out of the sky and landed at the edge of the arena. Xueqi also spat out a mouthful of blood as he flew out, smashing heavily into the white light barrier before falling to the ground powerlessly. The violent shockwaves, the earth-shattering explosion, and the fragments of light in the sky lasted for a long time before dissipating. This battle had finally ended, and the victor had been decided. Ji Tianqing stood in the middle of the arena without any change in expression. He was unscathed, and his body was as straight as a sword. He exuded a powerful, domineering, and mysterious aura. Xueqi staggered to his feet, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. His white robe was also dyed red, and he looked a little haggard. It was obvious who had won and who had lost. Seeing this, Great Emperor Chu Yun raised his eyebrows. His pupils constricted, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. The Sage Master and the other powerful experts all revealed looks of disbelief as they discussed secretly with each other through voice transmissions. The hundreds of thousands of people in the plaza were already dumbfounded. They could not believe it, and they all exclaimed in disgust. "Oh my God! Am I seeing things? That kid defeated Xueqi? How is that possible? This is too unbelievable. Even Xueqi couldn't have lost so thoroughly against Lan Yiqing, right? If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't dare to believe it. That kid fought 2 consecutive battles and defeated Quang Long and Xueqi. Although Xueqi hasn't admitted defeat yet, he is already heavily injured. I'm afraid he is no match for Ji Tianqing." 15 minutes ago, when Ji Tianqing stepped onto the arena for the first time and appeared in front of everyone, many people rejoiced in his misfortune and looked at him with disdain. But now, Ji Tianqing had defeated Quang Long and Xueqi in a domineering manner. He was extremely mysterious and powerful. Those who had mocked him before all felt awkward and embarrassed. Especially those who had said that Ji Tianqing was not worthy to challenge Xueqi. They were so embarrassed that they wanted to find a hole to hide in. Chapter 1481. On the arena, Ji Tianqing and Xueqi stopped fighting. The two of them stood a few thousand feet apart. One of them was as stable as a rock, while the other's aura was weak and his face was pale. Ji Tianqing looked at Xueqi calmly and said, "You have already lost." Xueqi held the yin-yang umbrella in his right hand while his left hand covered his bloodied chest. He stared at Ling Xian angrily. "Of course I know. Do I need you to remind me?" Ji Tianqing's expression did not change as he said, "If you are not satisfied, you can use your primordial spirit Dharma." His words were still short, and he spoke very slowly. His accent was also a little awkward. However, Xueqi ignored all this. He stared at Ling Xian with a dark expression and said angrily, "You are really annoying. I will admit defeat. With such a cold and stiff attitude, you will not be able to make friends in the future." Ji Tianqing was stunned. He looked at Xueqi strangely. After a moment of silence he said calmly, "I have never thought of making friends with you." Xueqi almost choked. He was so angry that he rolled his eyes. "You really don't know what's good for you. If not for the fact that I can't beat you, I would have beaten you to a pulp." Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly. He was too lazy to reply. Perhaps he did not know how to reply. Xueqi did not admit defeat. He continued, "Ji Tianqing, although you are very strong, I have to warn you. Don't even think about challenging Lan Yiqing. She is the undisputed #1 genius of the younger generation in the Chu Yun Empire. You have won 2 battles in a row. Your name has already spread far and wide. You should know when to stop. I am talented, good-looking, kind and magnanimous. So I will not argue with you. However, if you offend Lan Yiqing, you are dead meat." Xueqi said all this seriously. He did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. He looked as if it was a matter of course. Ji Tianqing couldn't stand his incessant chatter and couldn't help but frown. "You should go back and recuperate. Wu Kei's lips curled up into a playful smile. Hee hee, I thought you were a block of wood. So you actually know how to care about me. Thank you for your concern, but this injury is nothing to this young master. Ji Tianxing was completely speechless. He didn't bother with him anymore and turned to look at the Sage Sovereign on the rainbow auspicious cloud. He said loudly, Lord Sage Sovereign, I want to continue the challenge. Wu Kei's face froze as he shouted angrily. Ji Tianxing, brat, are you treating my words as nothing but the wind? If you fail the challenge, you will be executed. Ji Tianxing ignored him and looked at the Sage Sovereign with a determined gaze. The Sage Master frowned and pondered for a moment. He turned to look at Great Emperor Chu Yun and secretly asked for his opinion through voice transmission. Below the square, the hundreds of thousands of commoners were once again shocked by Ji Tianxing, once again letting out loud cries of surprise. Is this brat crazy? He has already won 2 matches in a row, and he still dares to challenge Lan Yiqing? This brat is too arrogant. He actually dares to challenge Lan Yiqing. He must be tired of living. In the entire Chu Yun Empire, who doesn't know Lan Yiqing's strength? That brat is dead for sure. Humph. Ji Tianxing has already won 2 matches in a row. He has already lost his mind. If he can get first place, his name will be known throughout the world today. When he enters the Clear Sky Pagoda in the future, he will also receive the best treatment. He is too rash. He has already lost his mind for fame. He has already won 2 matches in a row. How much strength does he have left? He is seeking his own death. When he fails the challenge, the Sage Sovereign will execute him on the spot. Just as countless people were discussing spiritedly, the Sage Master announced the results in a loud voice. In this match, Ji Tianxing has won and is now ranked 2nd. Wu Kei has fallen to 3rd place. Next match, Ji Tianxing will challenge Lan Yiqing. Since the Sage Sovereign had already spoken, Wu Kei could only suppress his anger and leave the stage with a gloomy face. Just as he flew to the edge of the stage, Lan Yiqing had already flown over from the plaza. She was like a ray of icy blue sword light, heading straight for the stage. When Lan Yiqing brushed past Wu Kei's shoulder, she said 2 words coldly. Trash. Wu Kei's body instantly froze. His face became extremely ugly, and a trace of cold anger flashed in his eyes. However, he suppressed his anger and pretended not to hear those 2 words. He silently returned to the bottom of the stage. Swish! A blue light flashed, and Lan Yiqing landed on the stage. She stood a few hundred feet away from Ji Tianxing. Her face was as cold as ice, and her eyes were as cold as ice as she stared at Ji Tianxing. She said in a cold voice, You are very arrogant, but you should not have challenged me. Ji Tianxing looked at her indifferently. His tone was indifferent as he said slowly, Just now, the 2 of them said the same thing. Lan Yiqing immediately frowned, and her eyes flashed coldly. You are courting death. As she spoke, a light flashed in her hand, and an icy blue crystal-clear treasure sword appeared. The treasure sword seemed to be formed from blue ice. It was exquisite and beautiful, and it exuded a formless cold aura. It could actually cause one's primordial soul to tremble and feel pain. Ji Tianxing frowned slightly as he sized up the treasure sword seriously. At the same time, a voice transmission sounded in his head. This is Lan Yiqing's famous sword. It is called the Extreme Ice Sword. It is made from the 9 heavens Xian Bing. It has already surpassed the primordial soul level. Be careful of her sword manipulation technique and the Xian Bing sword realm. Ji Tianxing turned his head to look at the bottom of the stage. He met Wu Kei's serious gaze. Although he wanted to ask Wu Kei why he was helping him, he had already done so. Lan Yiqing had already started to cast a spell. She controlled the extreme ice sword to attack. She did not move from her original spot as she conjured a sword spell with both hands. She used her primordial soul to control the sword and stabbed it towards Ji Tianxing. Swish! The extreme ice sword pierced through the sky, and 99 streaks of icy blue sword radiance shot out, enveloping Ji Tianxing's body. The entire stage flashed with cold light, and the temperature dropped to the extreme. Even steel could be frozen and cracked. Ji Tianxing was enveloped by the extreme ice qi. He felt his entire body turn cold, and even his primordial soul was about to be frozen. What a powerful sword qi! Is this the primordial spirit sword control technique? As this thought flashed across his mind, he waved the barrier of heaven with all his might, and 49 streaks of dark golden sword radiance shot out. The golden sword radiance formed a huge sword net, which enveloped the incoming icy blue sword radiance. Boom, boom, boom. The two sword radiances clashed violently, and there was a deafening sound. The sword radiance flashed, and golden and icy blue fragments flew everywhere. The entire stage started to shake. Ji Tianqing's 49 streaks of sword radiance were all destroyed. Out of the 99 streaks of icy blue sword radiance, more than 80 were destroyed. The remaining dozen streaks of sword radiance all hit him. He was blasted away on the spot, tumbling 1,000 feet away. Although his physical defense was strong, and he did not bleed, his white robes were white. However, his white robe was torn to shreds, and his chest and back were pierced with white marks by the sword light. The extremely cold air invaded his body, and his entire body was about to be frozen stiff. Chapter 1482. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The extreme ice sword unleashed 360 rays of icy blue sword light, forming a sword net that enveloped Ji Tianqing's figure once again. At that moment, the entire arena shone with blue light. Half of the sky seemed to have been sealed by the frost qi. Ji Tianqing cleared the frost qi in his body as quickly as possible and hurriedly used the stealth step. Whoosh! His figure immediately disappeared and teleported several thousand feet away, flying behind Lan Yiqing. Then, an inconceivable scene appeared. The 360 rays of icy blue sword light also appeared several thousand feet away, and continued to attack Ji Tianqing. It was obvious that the sky full of sword light had locked onto Ji Tianqing's primordial spirit. He couldn't escape no matter what. Wings of the Golden Rock. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing could only wrap his wings around his body and resist the onslaught of sword light. Bam bam bam. A series of muffled sounds erupted, shaking the sky. The sword light was all blocked by the golden wings and exploded into icy blue fragments. Ji Tianqing was also sent flying, crashing heavily into the white light barrier. His spiritual power was a little chaotic. Before he could launch a counterattack, Lan Yiqing controlled the extreme ice sword and slashed out 3 rays of icy blue light. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The dazzling icy blue brilliance condensed into 3 huge icy blue dragons that descended from the sky for the kill. The huge dragons stretched out their claws and fangs. They were extremely ferocious, as if they wanted to tear Ji Tianqing to pieces. Ji Tianqing wielded the barrier of heaven's sword and used all his strength to resist. Another series of pong 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 pong, muffled sounds burst out, and the 2 different colored sword lights collapsed into fragments all over the sky. Ji Tianqing was sent flying again, crashing into the corner of the arena. Lan Yiqing stood in the middle of the arena. She controlled the extreme ice sword with a cold expression and attacked Ji Tianqing continuously. From the very beginning, she had the upper hand in the initiative. She attacked Ji Tianqing fiercely, displaying her incomparably powerful strength and exquisite swordsmanship. Ji Tianqing was in an extremely passive situation. He could only rely on the divine concealment step and his exquisite swordsmanship to deal with her. It wasn't that the 9 swords of the Barrier of Heaven was inferior to Lan Yiqing's swordsmanship. In fact, the 9 swords of the Barrier of Heaven were of a higher grade, more profound and more powerful. However, Lan Yiqing's cultivation level was higher, and his foundation was too strong. He was even stronger than Ji Tianqing. In addition, her magical treasure, the Extreme Ice Sword, was a heavenly tribulation-grade magical treasure. Its power far exceeded that of a primordial soul-grade magical treasure. Because of this, she was able to completely suppress Ji Tianqing. The 2 of them fought fiercely in the arena, both displaying incomparably exquisite swordsmanship and exquisite spellcasting techniques. The hundreds of thousands of people in the square were dazzled by the sight. They were incomparably excited and constantly cheered and shouted, "Lan Yiqing, don't be soft-hearted. Trample on him. Ha ha! Arrogant brat. Do you know how powerful he is now? How can the top youth genius of our Chu Yun Empire be someone he can challenge? I already knew that this brat was no match for Lan Yiqing. He's just asking to be humiliated. I dare to bet that this brat will fall in less than 100 breaths' time." 100 breaths' time? Aren't you underestimating Lan Yiqing too much? At most 30 breaths' time, this brat will definitely be defeated. Almost everyone was certain that Ji Tianqing was going to lose. Soon, he would be defeated miserably. Even Xueqi, who was kind to him, didn't have high hopes for him. His face was solemn, and his eyes were filled with worry. On the rainbow clouds, the Xueqi Emperor, the Holy Master, and the others were watching the battle between Ji Tianqing and Lan Yiqing. They were discussing this through telepathy. The Holy Master secretly asked the Xueqi Emperor, "Your Majesty, although this brat isn't Lan Yiqing's match, he is still a rare genius. When he is defeated, are you really going to execute him in front of everyone?" The Xueqi Emperor glanced at the Holy Master expressionlessly. He replied with telepathy, "Do you want me to go back on my words?" The Holy Master quickly shook his head and explained, "Of course not. The Holy Master's reputation is not to be tarnished. However, I feel that it is a pity to execute Ji Tianqing like this. Although he is not as good as Lan Yiqing, he is still a rare genius. Although he is a foreigner, he is a citizen of our empire since he is participating in the ranking battle. We are picking up a young genius for free. Our empire is sending 2 top geniuses to the Clear Sky Pagoda. They will definitely impress the Divine Master. If he and Lan Yiqing perform well and win the Divine Master's recognition, the Divine Master might reward our empire and reduce our offerings." The Xueqi Emperor frowned. After thinking for a while, he nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. At the same time, Ji Tianqing and Lan Yiqing had already exchanged more than 100 moves in the arena. After more than 100 moves, Ji Tianqing was already familiar with Lan Yiqing's primordial spirit sword controlling technique and understood its profoundness. He gradually stabilized his footing and blocked the attacks in an orderly manner. He even found a chance to counterattack. After the situation stabilized, Lan Yiqing couldn't do anything to Ji Tianqing for the time being. Her expression became gloomier. Cold light flickered in her eyes, and her entire body was filled with a monstrous chill. Originally, she wanted to use her fastest speed to defeat Ji Tianqing in 10 moves and intimidate the world. However, after more than 100 moves, she couldn't suppress Ji Tianqing anymore. This made her angry as if she had been greatly insulted. Finally, she controlled the extreme ice sword to repel Ji Tianqing again. Then, she made a prompt decision to use her ultimate skill. Xuanbing Sword Field. She formed a seal with both hands and formed a mysterious seal. The extreme ice sword released a sky-piercing blue light that spread in all directions. Swish! Swish! Endless icy blue sword light enveloped the entire arena, forming an icy blue domain with a radius of 10 miles. The domain was filled with thousands of ice swords and cold qi that could freeze one's primordial spirit. This was her trump card, Xuanbing Sword Domain. Ji Tianqing was suppressed by the power of the Xuanbing Sword Realm. His movement speed was reduced by half. His arcane energy and Yuan Shen were also frozen, unable to circulate freely, and his battle prowess was greatly weakened. Lan Yiqing stood in the air, looking down at him with a cold expression. Ji Tianqing, it's time to end this. You don't have the qualifications to fight with me. As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her hands and cast a spell, manipulating thousands of sword lights of extreme ice to attack Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing glanced at her and a cold smile appeared on his face. I'll show you what a true sword domain is. As he spoke, his body lit up with a golden light that soared into the sky, and a giant golden sword that was thousands of feet tall appeared behind him. Swish! That was his primordial spirit golden sword. It shone with a sacred golden light, and thousands of purple lightning bolts circled around its surface, exuding a scorching and violent aura. Divine Thunder Sword Domain. He shouted and manipulated the primordial spirit golden sword to split into thousands of sword lights that spread in all directions. Swish! Swish! In the blink of an eye, a domain with a radius of 10 miles was formed. Golden light shone brightly, and lightning flashed. The domain was filled with a violent and overbearing aura. Chapter 1483. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the divine lightning sword domain that enveloped the arena. They revealed looks of disbelief. The resplendent golden light and tens of thousands of sword beams condensed into a mystical sword domain. This was actually nothing much. What truly left everyone dumbfounded was the explosive purple lightning. Everyone present knew very well that only 9th tribulation eminences could trigger the 9 heavens lightning tribulation. If one could survive every lightning strike, they would be considered to have transcended the tribulation. Their strength would also increase. Only 9th tribulation eminences had the right to control lightning. In the Outcloud Empire, there were many experts who could control lightning. However, these people had all reached the 9th tribulation realm. For example, Emperor Outcloud, the Sage Master, and the 8 nobles present. However, Ji Tianqing was only at the Essence Soul realm, yet he could control lightning. This was simply a miracle. It completely subverted everyone's understanding of the martial Dao realm. Not only were the hundreds of thousands of commoners stunned, but Emperor Outcloud, the Sage Master, and the 8 nobles' expressions changed drastically as they revealed looks of shock. On the 7-colored auspicious cloud, several powerful figures were discussing with each other in shock. How is this possible? He can actually control lightning with just the strength of an essence soul? How did he do it? I've cultivated the martial Dao for 400 years. This is the first time I've encountered such a strange thing. This kid is a freak. With some nurturing, his future achievements will be limitless. The Sage Master's expression changed several times as he secretly discussed this matter with Emperor Outcloud via voice transmission. Sage Emperor, I'm afraid we've picked up a treasure. Emperor Outcloud nodded slightly as his eyes flickered. He said solemnly, it's simply a miracle that he can control the power of lightning with just the strength of an essence soul. I really don't know where this kid came from. What kind of expert and faction can nurture such a monstrous genius? The Sage Master hurriedly said, this matter is easy. After the ranking battle ends, I'll summon this kid to the palace and interrogate him about his origins. Yes, we have to get to the bottom of this. Emperor Outcloud said with a burning gaze, I've been recruiting talents for hundreds of years, and it's finally paying off. After today's matter spreads out, the vast Heaven Pagoda's envoys will know very quickly. At that time, Lord Divine Master will definitely have a whole new level of respect for this emperor. The Sage Sovereign also revealed a gratified smile. What an unexpected gain. Sage Emperor, you will soon receive the Divine Master's favor. Just as everyone was discussing animatedly, the situation on the arena had already changed. Ji Tianqing released the Divine Thunder Sword domain, which completely offset the power of the Xianbing Sword domain. He repeatedly waved his palms, controlling tens of thousands of golden swords. With the Zidian that filled the sky, he fought fiercely with Lan Yiqing. Pang pang pang. Boom. The golden and icy blue sword light collided with each other, producing a loud, muffled sound. Streaks of lightning snakes exploded within the domain, producing deafening booms. The extreme ice sword light was shattered inch by inch. Lan Yiqing was also at a disadvantage, constantly retreating. The Xianbing sword domain that she was most proud of was actually unable to withstand a single blow from the might of the divine lightning. Her face was very gloomy, and her eyes were surging with shock and anger. Damn brat, he actually controlled the power of divine lightning. He really hid it well. He didn't appear earlier or later, but actually challenged me in the ranking battle to take away my honor. Damn it! The God-disciple ranking battle was very important to her. If she could enter the vast Heaven Pagoda as the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire, her future would be limitless. Only in this way would her decades of bitter cultivation not be in vain. But now, all of this was going to be destroyed in the hands of Ji Tianqing. How could she not be angry? Fortunately, the extreme ice sword's power was strong enough to support the Xianbing domain, and it would not collapse in a short period of time. She repeatedly waved her palms and used all her strength to cast spells to block Ji Tianqing's attacks. Finally, she found an opportunity and used her ultimate skill without hesitation. Ice Blade Storm. Following her cold shout, more than 9,000 ice sword lights condensed into a hurricane that was thousands of feet tall, engulfing Ji Tianqing. Swish! 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 The Xianbing hurricane spun rapidly, frantically trying to strangle Ji Tianqing. The power of the extreme ice cold was pushed to the limit by Lan Yiqing, crazily eroding Ji Tianqing's body. Ji Tianqing was in the middle of the Xianbing hurricane, and the blood in his body was almost frozen. But he tried his best to resist, directing 99 lightning pillars to attack the Xianbing hurricane. Boom! 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 In a series of loud noises, the Zidian lightning burst out, filling the entire domain. The arena was covered in purple light, and nothing could be seen clearly. The Xianbing hurricane collapsed on the spot, exploding into thousands of pieces and splashing in all directions. Lan Yiqing was swept up by the violent lightning, and she spat out blood on the spot, crashing into the light wall of the divine lightning sword domain. But she gritted her teeth and endured the pain, not making a sound. She immediately channeled her energy to suppress her injuries, and once again manipulated the power of the Xianbing sword domain to form thousands of ice-blue sword lights. As long as the power of the Xianbing sword domain was not exhausted, she could keep the Xianbing sword domain running and continue to fight Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing also saw this point. He frowned, and a thought flashed through his mind. Lan Yiqing's strength is slightly weaker than mine, but she can be so strong because of the power of the Xianbing sword. I have to find a way to break her sword domain, so I can defeat her as soon as possible. Otherwise, with the power of the Xianbing sword, she will exhaust my Dharma power sooner or later. After making up his mind, he immediately opened the Divine Lightning Dharma Eye on his forehead. Divine Lightning. The Divine Lightning Dharma Eye stored an endless amount of divine lightning, and it poured out like a flood. A 1,000-foot-long pillar of divine lightning instantly shattered all the ice swords in the sky, and fiercely hit the Xianbing sword domain. Boom! Crack! At that moment, the sound of thunder resounded through heaven and earth, and shook the area within a 1,000-mile radius. Half the sky was covered by purple light, and it was dazzling. Under the shocked gazes of countless people, a large hole was blasted open in the Xianbing sword domain, and dense cracks appeared. The destructive thunder turned into billions of electric snakes, and spread along the Xianbing sword domain. With a cracking sound, the Xianbing sword domain quickly collapsed, and soon it was broken into pieces. With the sword domain destroyed, Lan Yiqing's primordial spirit suffered a backlash. Her face turned pale, and blood flowed out of her mouth and nose. Her consciousness was hazy, and she was sent flying by the shock wave, and fell to the edge of the arena. She endured the injury of her primordial spirit and struggled for a while before she got up from the ground. She hurriedly channeled her Dharma power to heal the injury of her primordial spirit, and wanted to recover and continue to fight Ji Tianqing. However, Ji Tianqing had already removed the Divine Lightning Sword domain, and appeared in front of her out of thin air. Swoosh! The pitch-black and cold sword of Burial of Heaven was placed on her neck, and the tip of the sword was pointed at her throat. She looked up and met Ji Tianqing's cold and indifferent eyes. Chapter 1484. Lan Yiqing was the undisputed #1 genius among the younger generation of the Chu Yun Empire. From 20 years ago, she had stood out and won the title of the #1 genius 8 years ago. She had always carried a shining halo of glory. She was cold and arrogant. She did not even spare a glance for the younger martial artists of her generation. Even Xueqi and Kuang Long, who were second only to her, were nothing in her eyes. How could such a cold and arrogant girl admit defeat so easily? However, Ji Tianqing stood in front of her unscathed and pointed his sword at her throat. This scene was seen clearly by the Chu Yun Emperor, the Sage Master, and the hundreds of thousands of people in the imperial city. What could she do if she did not admit defeat? Intense humiliation and anger filled her heart, causing her slender body to tremble. She stared coldly at Ji Tianqing. Her pupils were burning with an icy blue flame. Her gaze was as sharp as a sword, as if she wanted to pierce Ji Tianqing into a sieve. Ji Tianqing could feel the unparalleled hatred in her extremely cold gaze. After a long while, Lan Yiqing said in a hoarse voice, "Ji Tianqing, I will remember you. I have worked hard for 20 years for today, but you have ruined it. Remember, one day, I will defeat you fair and square in front of everyone and kill you with my own hands." Lan Yiqing was not a talkative person. She had never spoken so much to anyone before. However, 20 years ago, she had been preparing for this year's God-disciple selection. She swore to enter the Clear Sky Pagoda as the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. In the past 20 years, in order to increase her strength and surpass her peers, she had worked hard day and night. She had endured unimaginable pain. She had been on the verge of success. However, in the final ranking battle, Ji Tianqing had appeared out of nowhere and snatched the #1 position from her, destroying all her efforts. The difference between the #2 and the #1 was only 1 position. However, the significance was completely different. The world would only look up to the most outstanding genius. Who would care about the #2? After that, Lan Yiqing expressionlessly turned around and left. He turned into an icy blue light and flew away like lightning. She left the square and disappeared into the horizon. Clearly, she didn't even want to look at the rankings, much less listen to the discussions of the crowd. Regardless of whether everyone was gloating or feeling sorry for her, this was an insult to her. After Lan Yiqing left, The sage master announced the result in a dignified voice. Ji Tianqing wins this battle. Ji Tianqing has risen to first place, and Lan Yiqing will rise to second place. The majestic and mighty voice spread throughout the entire square. The hundreds of thousands of civilians all put on complicated expressions as they exclaimed and discussed loudly. Many people were shocked and in disbelief. They still couldn't believe that a nameless kid like Ji Tianqing could defeat Lan Yiqing. Some people were interested in Ji Tianqing's identity, and were speculating about his origins and background. There were also people who were filled with righteous indignation. They were furious at Lan Yiqing's humiliating defeat. They beat their chests and stomped their feet, full of hatred and hostility towards Ji Tianqing. In the empty space below the stage, the dozen or so young geniuses all had complicated expressions. Everybody was sizing up Ji Tianqing with a serious look. They were secretly discussing his strength, methods, and background. They were quite vigilant against him. Xenophobia was a common trait of humans. It was the same in every world. Ji Tianqing, this unfamiliar outsider, became the opponent and enemy that everyone was on guard against. Only Xueqi was sizing up Ji Tianqing with his bright eyes and a playful smile on his face. I didn't expect this guy to be so sick. He could even defeat Lan Yiqing. I didn't lose unjustly. Seeing Lan Yiqing so angry that he was about to vomit blood, it was too damn satisfying. I like this kid more and more. Xueqi had been mocked and humiliated by Lan Yiqing many times. His heart was filled with hatred and he couldn't wait for Lan Yiqing to be humiliated. Unfortunately, his strength and background were not as strong as Lan Yiqing's. He could only endure Lan Yiqing's humiliation. Today, Ji Tianqing had helped him fulfill his wish and helped him vent his anger. Of course, he was in a good mood and wanted to laugh out loud. Previously, when he was defeated by Ji Tianqing, he was depressed and embarrassed. But now, all his depression and unhappiness were swept away. The challenge was over and Ji Tianqing had won first place. Naturally, he had to leave the stage. Swoosh! He stepped into the air and walked down from the stage. He landed on the empty space below the stage. The dozen or so young geniuses around him all took a few steps back and maintained their distance from him. Only Xueqi didn't care about the strange looks that others were giving him. He quickly went up to him. He walked in front of Ji Tianqing, reached out his hand with a smile, and patted Ji Tianqing's shoulder. Not bad, kid. You really hid your strength well. Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly. He frowned and didn't say anything. Anyone could tell that he didn't want to be too close to Xueqi. However, Xueqi pretended not to see his expression. He acted as if he was very familiar with him and smiled. Ji Tianqing, from today onwards, you are the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. In a few days, the Clear Sky Pagoda's emissary will arrive and bring us to the Clear Sky Pagoda. When that time comes, we will enter the Clear Sky Pagoda to cultivate and we will be brothers. Ji Tianqing continued to ignore him. He looked at the stage expressionlessly and treated him like air. Xueqi didn't feel awkward at all. He stood shoulder to shoulder with him and looked at the stage with a smile. He was still talking non-stop. Lan Yiqing, that girl, has always been arrogant and cold. She doesn't care about anyone. It's a pity that we can't afford to offend her. Even if she humiliates us, we can't fight back. But you are strong enough. Not only did you ruin her reputation, you defeated her in front of everyone. You even made her accept her defeat wholeheartedly. How satisfying. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but frown. He turned to look at him and said coldly, "Don't speak without thinking. What do you mean I ruined her reputation?" Xueqi was startled. He hurriedly explained, "Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that you tainted her innocence. What I mean is..." Seeing that he was making things worse, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but shout, "Shut up!" Xueqi frowned and curled his lips to express his dissatisfaction. Previously, her eyes were very bright when she looked at you. She seemed to be interested in you. If you are brave enough, maybe you can try to taint her. Maybe she won't resist? Ji Tianqing's face turned even darker. He looked at him seriously and said coldly, "Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a noble young master named Murong. He was even more beautiful than a girl. He took the initiative to get close to me and tried his best to rope me in. But then, Xueqi's interest was immediately piqued. he asked expectantly. Then what happened? Ji Tianqing looked at him coldly and said slowly, Then I killed him. Not even his bones were left. Chapter 1485. If Ji Tianqing remained silent, Yin Wu-Kei could still pretend that he did not see his coldness and take the initiative to express his goodwill. However, Ji Tianqing's story made Yin Wu-Kei feel extremely awkward. After remaining silent for a while, he said to Ji Tianqing, although you have obtained first place, you are still an outsider and a rootless duckweed. This young master is magnanimous and will not argue with you. However, if you continue to be so cold and arrogant in the future, I am afraid that you will not be able to do anything and will meet with misfortune sooner or later. Furthermore, this young master is only reminding you out of goodwill. If you do not know what is good for you, this young master will not bother with you. Ji Tianqing naturally understood this logic. However, he was naturally disgusted and repulsed by such a seductive young master. Hence, he looked at Yin Wu-Kei calmly and said seriously, Thank you for your reminder. However, please be more reserved. Yin Wu-Kei rolled his eyes gloomily and turned to leave. Quang Long, who was not far away, watched this scene silently. He could not help but reveal a mocking smile. When Yin Wu-Kei walked past him, he laughed coldly and transmitted his voice. Kakik. You are being snubbed, right? You are really shameless. Yin Wu-Kei turned his head and glanced at him. His face was filled with contempt as he replied, You were defeated by him in less than 3 moves. How can you still have the face to speak? He is better looking than you, his aura is more outstanding than yours and his strength is much higher than yours. If this young master does not want to get close to him, should I care about an ugly and disgusting brute like you? Quang Long's face turned green from the humiliation. He clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth as he stared at Yin Wu-Quebec. He wanted to tear him into pieces. Yin Wu-Kei. You Yin Yang. Just as he was about to scold him, Yin Wu-Kei revealed an extremely disdainful look. Ugly person, don't talk to this young master. You are dirtying my eyes and ears. After saying this, he carried the exquisite Yin Yang umbrella and walked away leisurely. Quang Long was so angry that he almost vomited blood. However, he could not refute him. He could only stare at his back view and curse him in his heart. Very quickly, 15 minutes passed. None of the geniuses stepped onto the stage to challenge again. The rankings had already been fixed. The sage master announced loudly, The ranking battle of this year's Disciple of God selection has ended. The 15 young geniuses on the list would represent their countries and head to the vast heaven pagoda to cultivate in seclusion. I wish all of you good luck in martial arts. I also hope that all of you will work hard in your cultivation. Don't let down the prestige of your country, and fight for the glory of your country. 7 days later, the vast heaven pagoda's divine envoy will grace the imperial city with his presence and come to guide everyone to the vast heaven pagoda. During this period, everyone must stay in the imperial city and do not leave. If you delay the journey, you will bear the consequences. After the announcement, the rainbow auspicious cloud flew high into the sky, left the city square, and flew towards the imperial palace in the north. The hundreds of thousands of people in the square all heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Earth-shattering discussions and cheers erupted. Everyone's emotions were stirred up as they fervently discussed the previous ranking battles. Almost all the topics revolved around Ji Tianqing, Lan Yiqing, and the others. Everyone knew that from today onwards, Ji Tianqing's name would definitely spread throughout the Outcloud Empire, and he would become a super genius that everyone knew. The most important thing was that his identity and origin were mysterious. It was very topical. He came out of nowhere and swept away the 3 great young geniuses the moment he showed his face. He won 3 battles in a row and seized first place bravely. He was ridiculously domineering and was also rather legendary. Ji Tianqing did not pay attention to anyone. After the sage master and the rest left, he silently left the city square. He returned to the temporary lodging place in the southern city and entered an old house. The house was not large. It was only 50 feet square. But there was an ancient pine in the courtyard. There was an ancient well and a stone table under the tree. The environment was still considered peaceful. He entered the bedroom and sat cross-legged on the dark red pear-wood bed. He closed his eyes and circulated his skill to meditate. After a moment, He clearly sensed that there were over a dozen indistinct divine senses that were currently quietly sweeping across the entire house. After those dozen over formless divine senses dissipated, several more unfamiliar divine senses probed over and secretly observed the situation in the house. Without a doubt, he had become famous in the arena today. He had attracted the attention of the entire imperial city. Experts from all walks of life were targeting him. Not only were there people using their divine senses to probe his location, but there were also many sneaky warriors lurking around the house, secretly monitoring him. He didn't even need to investigate to know that many factions had already begun investigating his identity and origins. However, all of this was within his expectations. He had long thought of a countermeasure, so he wasn't worried about it. Unknowingly, an entire afternoon passed. He meditated for a few hours, recovering a lot of his dermic powers and psyche. Just as the sky turned dark and the lanterns were lit, a group of people arrived at the entrance of the house. The leader was a middle-aged man with a dignified bearing. He wore silver standard armor, and a wide sword hung by his waist. His entire body emitted the aura of a ninth tribulation eminence. Behind him was a group of solemn and dignified guards. Their actions were uniform, making them appear disciplined. Ji Tianqing probed with his divine sense and identified these people. They were most likely palace guards. As expected, the group of people stepped into the house and stood still. The silver-armored man shouted in a dignified voice, "I'm here on the orders of the Holy Emperor to pass on an imperial edict." Ji Tianqing, quickly come and receive the edict. When Ji Tianqing heard this, he immediately raised his eyebrows. The corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. I was right. Great Emperor Chu Yun secretly sent people to monitor me. He has long found out where I'm staying. In the end, he couldn't hold back and wanted to figure out my identity and origins. He remained silent and didn't reply. He continued sitting on the bed with his eyes closed. He had no intention of receiving the edict. In the house, the silver-armored man waited for a while, but Ji Tianqing didn't appear. He immediately frowned in displeasure. He looked coldly at the bedroom door and shouted angrily in a low voice, "Ji Tianqing, if you don't appear to receive the edict, you will be looking down on the Holy Emperor's dignity. This is a crime punishable by death." Ji Tianqing still didn't appear. He only said calmly, "Please tell the Holy Emperor that I won't be receiving guests for the time being, nor will I leave the imperial city. I will only wait 7 days for the Clear Sky Pagoda's divine envoy to arrive. I will naturally leave with the divine envoy." His voice reached the courtyard. When the silver-armored man heard this, he frowned and thought to himself, "Damn it. This kid really doesn't know what's good for him. He's actually so arrogant and rude. I'm here on orders to pass on an imperial edict. This is the Holy Emperor's order to summon him. He actually treats it as a visit? How preposterous." The silver-armored man had been the captain of the palace guards for more than 100 years. He had been ordered to pass on hundreds of edicts. Those who were summoned by the Holy Emperor, no matter how noble or powerful they were, would all respectfully receive the edict. Chapter 1486. Given the silver-armored man's personality, he really wanted to order Ji Tianqing to be arrested. He wanted to send Ji Tianqing to the palace for trial and charge him with the crime of deceiving the emperor and looking down on the sage emperor. However, he remained silent for a moment and suppressed his anger. He knew that Ji Tianqing had a mysterious background and a special identity. He had just won first place in the ranking battle today, causing a sensation in the entire imperial city. From the reactions of the sage emperor and the sage master, it seemed that they valued this person. He was only a guard captain and didn't dare to make decisions on his own. He couldn't bear the responsibility if he ruined the sage emperor's plan. Therefore, he weighed the pros and cons and left the residence with the guards. He returned to the palace to report the news. In the northern city district of Heavenly Cloud City, there was a magnificent palace complex that covered an area of 20 square kilometers. This was the Outcloud Empire's imperial palace. It was sacred and dignified, and no one could blaspheme it. Under the dark night sky, the imperial palace was brightly lit both inside and outside. Countless elite guards stood guard inside and outside the imperial palace, guarding the various checkpoints and key roads. The entire imperial palace was protected by a powerful array formation. There were also countless open and hidden sentries, as well as patrolling guards. In the depths of the imperial palace, there were many experts holding down the fort. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was impossible for a million-strong army or a large number of Ninth Tribulation experts to sneak into the imperial palace. Only super experts at the martial sage realm could sneak into the imperial palace. In the depths of the imperial palace, a dark golden light was lit in a quaint and elegant study. This was Emperor Outcloud's imperial study. It was decorated very luxuriously, but it didn't lose its elegance. The study was spacious and clean. A gorgeous palace lamp hung on the roof in the middle. It was inlaid with hundreds of gems. Rows of bookcases, vases, screens, and other items were placed on the walls. Exquisite paintings and maps hung on the walls. Emperor Outcloud, who was dressed in a golden robe, was sitting on a wide golden throne. On the purple jade desk in front of him were a few stacks of memorials, documents, and more than a dozen white jade slips. 2 dragon-shaped bronze incense burners were emitting green smoke. There was also a crystal-clear white jade pot that contained a pot of supreme-grade calming tea. It emitted a faint fragrance. Great Emperor Chu Yun sat on his throne with his eyes closed. Occasionally, he would take a sip of tea from his jade cup. The white-robed sacred expert silently stood to the side, quietly waiting while holding the golden book and large brush. A moment later, a man's voice came from outside the study. Reporting to the Saint Emperor, "I, Xueqi, am here to report." Emperor Chu Yun opened his eyes and looked at the door of the study with anticipation. The Sage Master said with a dignified tone, "Bring Xueqi for an audience." As soon as he finished speaking, the door to the study opened. A middle-aged man in silver armor entered the study with a respectful expression. This person was the captain of the royal guards, Xueqi, who had announced the decree to Ji Tianxing. He walked to the middle of the study and stood still. Just as he was about to report the news, Great Emperor Chu Yun frowned. There was confusion and displeasure in his eyes. The sage sovereign also asked in a dignified tone, "Where's Ji Tianxing? Why didn't you bring him here?" Xueqi was intimidated by the two's powerful auras. He immediately bowed in fear and explained, "Please forgive me, Saint Emperor. I went to Ji Tianxing's residence and announced the decree in person. However, that brat was very arrogant. Not only did he not show himself, but he also went against the Saint Emperor's decree." Then, Xueqi repeated Ji Tianxing's words to Great Emperor Chu Yun and the Sage Master. After he finished speaking, Great Emperor Chu Yun and the Sage Master's expressions changed. They frowned fiercely, and their eyes were somewhat gloomy. "Xueqi, you may leave first." The Sage Master waved his hand and dismissed Xueqi. After Xueqi left, only Great Emperor Chu Yun and the Sage Master were left in the study. Great Emperor Chu Yun frowned. He gently knocked on the purple jade table with one hand and said with a gloomy expression, "Is this brat too arrogant or too ignorant?" The Sage Master analyzed expressionlessly. Although Ji Tianxing isn't a citizen of this country, no matter where he comes from, he should understand the principle that the monarch's authority is as heavy as a mountain. In my opinion, it's not that this brat doesn't know etiquette, but that he's purposely refusing to see you. Humph. He's purposely provoking my dignity to test my attitude? Great Emperor Chu Yun raised his eyebrows and sneered. The Sage Master frowned and thought for a moment. He shook his head and said, "This brat is overflowing with talent and outstanding. He doesn't seem like such a reckless person. What's the difference between this and seeking death? I think he's most likely trying to convey a message to the Saint Emperor to let you know his position." Great Emperor Chu Yun's interest was piqued. He said, "Let's hear it." The Sage Master said in a low voice, "According to what this brat said to Xueqi, he clearly wants you to know that he's not interested in any of the influential forces in this country. He doesn't want to come into contact with the forces in this country. He'll only wait 7 days for the Clear Sky Pagoda's divine envoy to arrive and leave this country." Great Emperor Chu Yun thought for a moment and nodded. "After your analysis, there's some truth to it. The various major forces in this country will definitely be unable to hold back and will secretly find an opportunity to contact him, rope him in and bribe him. If there's a hidden force behind him, they will also try to contact him. Let the heavenly shadow guards continue to monitor him and don't let go of any clues. I want to see what his background is. Are his goals and intentions really what he said they were?" The Sage Master nodded slightly and said in a solemn tone, "In addition, I've also ordered all the Shadow Guard branches in the Empire to do their best to investigate him. Great Emperor Chu Yun nodded in satisfaction. That's good. If there's a problem with his identity and background, we'll be able to find out the results very quickly. If he's really innocent and magnanimous, then I'll fulfill his wish and let him smoothly head to the Clear Sky Pagoda 7 days later. After saying that, Great Emperor Chu Yun slowly got up and straightened his sleeves. He turned around and was about to walk out. Sage Master, follow me. The Sage Master was stunned and asked doubtfully, Sage Master, where are you going? Great Emperor Chu Yun revealed a playful smile and answered while walking out, Of course, I'm going to Ji Tianqing's residence. The Sage Master revealed a stunned expression and said in disbelief, Sage Master, that brat just rejected your summons. Not only did you not punish him, but you're also going to meet him personally? This matter will definitely spread. At that time, won't others laugh at you? Great Emperor Chu Yun waved his hand and said meaningfully, No, this is all superficial. However, I'm going to meet him personally. This is the way of an emperor. Ji Tianqing won first place today and his name shook the imperial city. This news must have spread throughout the empire. When I sent Yu Kai to summon him, it must have been seen by the secret agents of the various major forces. Because of this, not only can I not punish Ji Tianqing, but I'm also going to meet him personally. Only then can I show my magnanimity and respect to the wise. Chapter 1487. Great Emperor Chu Yun's words enlightened the Sage Master. As it turned out, Great Emperor Chu Yun wasn't truly magnanimous, nor was he a wise ruler who treated his subjects with respect. He wanted to act like he was thirsty for talents to win the praise and respect of the empire's citizens. This was for the common people of the world to see, and also for Divine Lord Taihao to see. The Sage Master understood and didn't say anything else. He accompanied Great Emperor Chu Yun out of the study, and hurriedly summoned a group of palace guards. They carried a luxurious dragon carriage and escorted Great Emperor Chu Yun out of the palace. About an hour later, the dragon carriage arrived outside Ji Tianqing's residence. Great Emperor Chu Yun took advantage of the night to meet Ji Tianqing. He didn't set up any ceremonial guards and didn't cause any commotion. He seemed to be very low-key. However, everyone knew that the secret agents of the various factions would soon receive the news. This news would spread throughout the city tomorrow. At that time, the citizens would definitely secretly discuss this matter and praise the sacred emperor. Great Emperor Chu Yun walked down from the dragon carriage and ordered the palace guards to guard the courtyard entrance. He only brought the Sage Master with him. He stepped into the courtyard and stood still. The Sage Master held the golden book and brush in his hands and said with a dignified expression, Ji Tianqing, the sacred emperor has personally come. Why aren't you coming out to welcome him? In the bedroom, Ji Tianqing was still sitting on the bed, but his eyes were already open. He frowned and thought to himself with a strange expression, This great Emperor Chu Yun actually came to see me personally? If he isn't loyal, then he's a traitor. He could guess why Great Emperor Chu Yun had personally come to see him. It was most likely a show of effort on the surface, taking the opportunity to show his tolerance and desire for talent. Since Great Emperor Chu Yun had personally come, he had to meet him no matter what. Otherwise, he would be too arrogant. At that time, even if Great Emperor Chu Yun wanted to execute him, no one would sympathize with him. Thus, he got up and walked out of the bedroom. He tidied his clothes and walked to the courtyard. Ji Tianqing greets the sacred emperor and Sage Master. He calmly cupped his hands and greeted the great emperor of the Chu Yun Empire and the sacred master. You may rise. Great Emperor Chu Yun nodded slightly and led the Sage Master to the main seat in the living room. Ji Tianqing followed him into the living room and sat down on a chair on the left. Great Emperor Chu Yun looked at him with burning eyes and said sternly, Ji Tianqing, you should know why I'm here, right? I don't quite understand. Please enlighten me, Saint Emperor. Ji Tianqing shook his head and calmly replied. Great Emperor Chu Yun's lips curled into a playful smile as he said in a dignified tone, There's only me, the Saint Master, and you here. There's no need to play dumb. Let me be frank. Where did you come from? What is your background? Why did you enter the imperial city and interfere with the god disciples' ranking battle? What is your purpose? With that, he waved his hand and shot out a dark golden light that enveloped the entire house. In this way, no one could find out what was going on in the house or hear their conversation. Ji Tianxing had expected that Great Emperor Chu Yun would question him about this. He calmly explained, "You may not believe me, Saint Emperor, but I'm telling the truth. A year ago, I woke up in a desolate mountain range. I was seriously injured and had lost all my memories. I didn't know where I came from or where I was going. After I recovered, I walked out of the mountain range and came to the Chu Yun Empire to familiarize myself with the environment. One day, I accidentally heard about the god-disciple selection and learned about the legend of the Clear Sky Pagoda. I don't know why, but an obsession emerged from the depths of my soul. I wanted to participate in the god-disciple selection and return to the Clear Sky Pagoda no matter what." Great Emperor Chu Yun and the Sage Master looked at him expressionlessly and listened to his story quietly. When they heard this, their expressions changed and they frowned at the same time. "What? Return to the Clear Sky Pagoda? Ji Tianxing, what do you mean? Do you have some relationship with the Clear Sky Pagoda?" Ji Tianxing appropriately revealed a blank expression. He calmly shook his head and said with a confused look, "I don't know what's going on either. I racked my brains for a long time, but unfortunately, my memory is blank. I can't remember the past at all. I only know that the 3 words Clear Sky Pagoda made me feel close and warm from the bottom of my soul. It seemed to be related to me in the past." Great Emperor Chu Yun and the Sage Master frowned and narrowed their eyes. An imperceptible shock and a trace of suspicion flashed across their eyes. The two looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The Sage Master secretly used his divine sense to check Ji Tianxing's divine sense to see if he was lying. Great Emperor Chu Yun stared at Ji Tianxing with burning eyes and said in a dignified tone, "Ji Tianxing, what you've said is simply too inconceivable and unbelievable. You should know very well what the Clear Sky Pagoda means. It's the sacred place of martial arts in the divine nation of Tai Hao, the place where Divine Lord Tai Hao preaches. If what you said is true, I will let you leave safely and follow the divine envoy to the Clear Sky Pagoda. If you dare to fabricate lies, I will definitely sentence you to death and destroy your soul." Great Emperor Chu Yun shouted angrily and released a terrifying martial sage aura that suppressed Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing's body suddenly shook, and his face turned pale. His whole body trembled, and cold sweat dripped down his back. However, he endured the terrifying suppressive power and stared at Great Emperor Chu Yun with clear eyes. He said firmly, "Saint Emperor, I am not lying at all. If you don't believe me, you can send a message to the Clear Sky Pagoda and ask for the details." Great Emperor Chu Yun did not speak. He stared at him sharply and observed the subtle changes in his expression. After a long while, he withdrew his terrifying martial sage aura and a playful smile appeared on his face. "Ha! If that's the case, I will believe you this time and allow you to leave the nation and go to the Clear Sky Pagoda. I also hope that you can recover your memory soon and figure out your identity and origin. When that time comes, don't forget the kindness I have shown the Chu Yun Empire." Ji Tianxing lowered his head and panted silently. He did not reply. Great Emperor Chu Yun glanced at the Sage Master and saw him nodding slightly. He then got up and walked to the door. "Rest here for the next few days. Remember to go to the city square 7 days later, and welcome the arrival of the Clear Sky Pagoda's emissary." When he finished speaking, he had already led the Sage Master out of the house and boarded the luxurious dragon carriage. Soon, the palace guards carried the dragon carriage and left the house quickly, disappearing into the night. Ji Tianxing slowly raised his head and looked coldly at the entrance of the house. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "Fortunately, I was prepared and made up the story in advance. That was how I was able to fool Great Emperor Chu Yun." Chapter 1488. Before participating in the ranking battle, Ji Tianxing spent 3 days preparing. He found out that the great emperor of the Chu Yun Empire was a hypocrite who was eager for quick success. He also knew that the Clear Sky Pagoda's status was sacred and unattainable. Even the great emperor of the Chu Yun Empire would not go to the Clear Sky Pagoda to investigate the truth. That was why he dared to fabricate an amnesia story. He used this story to hint to the great emperor of the Chu Yun Empire that he was somehow related to the Clear Sky Pagoda. If the great emperor of the Chu Yun Empire wanted to kill him, he would have to consider the consequences. Moreover, if he went to the Clear Sky Pagoda as the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire, there would only be benefits for the great emperor of the Chu Yun Empire. The great emperor of the Chu Empire was astute. How could he not understand the stakes? The facts also proved that Ji Tianqing had made the right bet. The situation was just as he expected. After the great emperor of the Chu Empire tested him, he did not summon him again. Of course, the spies and experts hiding in the surroundings of the house had never left. They had been secretly monitoring him all this time. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. Heavenly Cloud City was still bustling with noise and excitement. The citizens of the city were still discussing the ranking battle. They were immersed in shock and amazement. The streets and alleys were filled with people in groups of 3 to 5. They were all discussing and guessing Ji Tianqing's background. Ji Tianqing's name became known to women and children. He became the center of all the topics. Moreover, there was a rumor that swept through the entire imperial city like a gust of wind. The streets, alleys, houses, taverns, and other places in the city, as long as there were martial artists and citizens gathered, the same conversation was playing out. It said that on the night of the ranking battle, the Holy Emperor sent a guard captain to summon Ji Tianqing to the palace for an audience. However, Ji Tianqing had shut the door on the guard captain and refused to show himself. Not only that, he even arrogantly refused to meet the Saint Emperor. Countless people were shocked when they heard this. Their eyeballs almost fell to the ground. No one dared to believe that the #1 genius, Ji Tianqing, was so arrogant that he even dared to defy the Holy Emperor's decree. Isn't this too arrogant? He's simply brainless. Is he not afraid of being hacked to death by the Imperial Guards for provoking the Saint Emperor like this? Even if he's the #1 genius and is about to become the vast Heaven Pagoda's god disciple, he also doesn't have the qualifications to put on airs before a Holy Emperor. Unbelievable. Is this news true? You didn't make it up, did you? Ji Tianqing must have been sentenced to death by 1,000 cuts, right? However, this was only the first half of the news. The second half of the news was even more shocking and shocked everyone present. Hee. Everyone might not believe it, but not only was Ji Tianqing not executed, he is still alive and well. That night, the Holy Emperor actually brought the Holy Emperor to Ji Tianqing's residence. The Sage Emperor had personally left the palace to meet him. Although no one knows what the Sage Emperor said to him, according to the palace guards, the Sage Emperor seemed to be in a good mood. When everyone heard this news, the entire place was silent. Everyone was dumbfounded and completely dumbfounded. When everyone came back to their senses, they opened their eyes wide and cried out in surprise as if they had seen a ghost. Oh my God! This can't be true, right? You. Are you sure you're not joking? Making up stories about the Sage Emperor is punishable by death. This is unbelievable. Ji Tianqing offended the Sage Emperor's dignity. Not only did the Sage Emperor not blame him, he even went to meet him personally? Damn Ji Tianqing, he's too arrogant and rude. Luckily, the Sage Emperor is wise and virtuous and magnanimous, so he forgave Ji Tianqing's crime. Otherwise, he would have been executed long ago. Yes. The Sage Emperor is broad-minded and thirsty for talents. That's why he treated Ji Tianqing so courteously. We are extremely lucky to be able to receive the Sage Emperor's protection. With the Sage Emperor in charge of the empire, why should we worry about not being able to prosper? There will be a day when our empire will become the #1 empire. Countless cultivators and commoners came back to their senses and sang praises of the great emperor of the Chu Empire. They worshipped and supported him. As for Ji Tianqing, everyone felt that he was even more mysterious and extraordinary. They were filled with deep respect for him. A young genius who was worthy of the great emperor of the Chu Empire's treatment had not appeared in the past 300 years. How could they not fear and envy him? 2 days later, this news spread out of the imperial city and quickly spread to all the major cities. Most people had the same reaction when they heard this news. Unknowingly, the great emperor of the Chu Empire's reputation became even higher. He also received more support and praise from the commoners. Ji Tianqing also became more legendary. He became the most mysterious martial arts genius in the past 300 years. In the east of the Chu Empire, there was a glacial region that stretched for millions of miles. Under the pale blue glaciers were endless majestic mountain ranges. There were many strange peaks and ravines. The terrain and environment here were very special. It was called the Eternal Night Glacier. There was no sunlight here for many years. The sky was always covered by thick haze and clouds. The glacial region with a radius of millions of miles was dark and gloomy. Cold winds howled as if it was eternally sleeping in the night. That was how the Eternal Night Glacier got its name. This was a dangerous, forbidden area. It was also the private territory of the Lan family. Without permission, no one was allowed to step into the Eternal Night Glacier. Otherwise, they would die. In the depths of the Eternal Night Glacier, there was a castle with a radius of 5 kilometers on top of a huge ice peak that was tens of thousands of feet tall. The castle was completely built with ice. It looked crystal clear and flickered with a pale blue light. It looked dreamy, like a small kingdom in a world of ice and snow. At this moment, in a secret room in the depths of the castle, a tall figure in a black robe was sitting on a pale blue and blazing white throne. The room was dark and gloomy, and the temperature was extremely low. The figure was covered by a black robe. It covered the figure's body, limbs, and face. It was impossible to tell whether it was a man or a woman. It was also impossible to tell his age and appearance. This person had no aura at all. It was as if he had become one with the ice. There was no sound or temperature. It was very strange. Suddenly, the door of the secret room opened. A middle-aged man in a blue robe walked into the secret room quickly. He knelt on one knee in front of the black-robed figure and bowed respectfully. "My lord, there is new news from the imperial city." From within the black robe, a cold, deathly still, emotionless voice rang out. "Speak." It was impossible to tell if the voice was male or female. It was like two pieces of ice rubbing against each other. It was sharp and ear-piercing. The blue-robed man lowered his head respectfully and reported in a serious tone. "On the night of the ranking battle, the Saint Emperor summoned Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing refused to meet the Saint Emperor and refused to meet him." Chapter 1489. After the blue-robed man reported the news, the secret chamber fell into silence. The black-robed figure was silent for a long time before he said a few words coldly. "He's arrogant. There's something wrong with this." The blue-robed man stood respectfully with his hands by his side and reported in a low voice. "You're right. Judging from that guy's behavior, he has a mysterious background and is very arrogant. With Emperor's temperament and bearing, he would never tolerate such arrogant behavior. But for some reason, Emperor tolerated him and did not intend to pursue the matter. I've sent people to investigate, but they couldn't find out what Emperor had talked about with him. I'm just guessing that the guy really has amazing talent, which is why Emperor thinks so highly of him and treats him so honorably." The black-robed figure was silent for a while before he asked, "Have you found out about that guy's background?" The blue-robed man quickly replied, "I've investigated more than 10 top forces and hundreds of noble families in our country, but I couldn't find any information about him. So far, we've confirmed that he's probably not a citizen of our country. Even if he's from our country, he must be from a poor family with no foundation or background to speak of." When he said this, the blue-robed man's tone was firm and filled with coldness. The black-robed figure was silent for a while before he asked again, "How's Qing'er's situation?" The blue-robed man looked worried and said in a low voice, "Since Miss lost to Ji Tianqing in public, she returned to the villa outside the imperial city and shut herself in. Miss is really angry and she hates him very much. The few maidservants who served her were all injured or killed by her. Even the young master who went to comfort her was injured and thrown out by her. Now, no one dares to go near her." The black-robed figure did not say anything. He was not surprised by this result. The blue-robed man frowned and said in a resentful tone, "Miss has worked hard for decades and endured so much pain and suffering just to make a name for herself in this year's Disciple of God selection. That damned bastard appeared out of nowhere in the ranking battle and took away Miss's title as the #1 genius. He humiliated Miss in public and made her decades of hard work go down the drain. More importantly, they even humiliated our Lan family, and made the other families secretly laugh at us and gloat over our misfortune. Jun Shang, this enmity must be avenged. Not only will it help Miss vent her anger, but it will also show the dignity of our Lan family." After pausing for a while, the blue-robed man continued, "Emperor's attitude towards that guy is very indulgent. He seems to have high hopes and completely gave up on Mississippi. When that guy enters the Clear Sky Pagoda in the future, he will definitely overshadow Miss's glory and treatment." After the elders in the clan discussed, they all proposed to quietly assassinate that brat before he headed to the vast Heaven Pagoda. Anyway, he has no background in this country. He is like a rootless duckweed. Killing him is pointless. The black-robed figure remained motionless. His tone was cold and emotionless as he said, "Kill, of course we have to kill. Those who block my Lan family's path will die without a doubt. However, this matter cannot be handled by the disciples of the Lan family." The blue-robed man hurriedly nodded and said, "Monarch, this subordinate understands what you mean. Our Lan family's disciples have a special cultivation method, and it's easy to leave behind traces and clues. Emperor thinks very highly of that guy. If we leave any evidence behind, it will inevitably cause a storm. I have thought it through. I will contact the Hidden Killer Pavilion later and let them send assassins to kill him. I guarantee that we can get rid of him successfully. Even if this matter is exposed, Emperor will at most find out that it was done by the Hidden Killer Pavilion. He will definitely not implicate our Lan family." "Very good." The black-robed man agreed. "Do it quickly." "Yes." The blue-robed man bowed and hurriedly left the secret chamber. In an old house in Heavenly Cloud City, Ji Tianxing was still in his bedroom, sitting on the bed with his eyes closed. On the surface, he looked like he was just resting. But in reality, his primordial spirit was slowly circulating and accumulating vast dermic powers. He was repeatedly sorting out his martial arts foundation in preparation to break through to the 5th level of the primordial spirit realm. Before the battle with the demons, he had reached the 4th level of the primordial spirit realm. In order to deal with the ancestor fiend celestial, he had even used the ancient god sword array to gather the strength of countless experts, temporarily reaching the peak of the primordial spirit realm. Now, he had reached the limits of the 4th level of the primordial spirit realm. He was just a step away from breaking through to the 5th level. He was not in a hurry to succeed. He raised his strength methodically and wanted to break through naturally. During the process of cultivation, he also used his divine sense to secretly investigate the situation around the house. Within a 5-kilometer radius, there were dozens of streets and tens of thousands of houses. More than 300,000 people lived there. However, he could still clearly detect that there were dozens of spies in the area who were constantly monitoring him. Most of the spies were from the imperial family. Only a few came from other factions. A few days ago, there were more than 1,000 spies secretly monitoring him. It was very messy. Ever since Emperor Tian came personally to find him, the news spread in the city. 90% of the spies of the various factions were withdrawn overnight. After all, Emperor Tian's personal visit was an indication of his attitude. Most factions did not dare offend Emperor Tian. They naturally wanted to avoid arousing suspicion, and did not dare to involve themselves in the matter. The spies who dared to continue monitoring him were definitely from the top factions. Ji Tianxing only needed to analyze a little to understand these principles. Although my current situation seems dangerous, it is actually the safest. The various tyrants are watching me. Emperor Tian's men are also monitoring me. No one dares to act rashly. There are still 3 days left before the divine envoy of the Clear Heaven Pagoda arrives. When the time comes, I will leave Heavenly Cloud City with the divine envoy. Everything will be resolved and I will no longer have anything to do with the Outcloud Empire. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, he sighed silently in his heart. Yao Yao, where are you? When I enter the Clear Heaven Pagoda, will I receive news of you and see your traces? Unknowingly, it was already midnight. Under the pitch-black curtain of night, the old house was silent. The house's main door and the various rooms were not lit. They slept in the pitch-black darkness. The spies who were secretly monitoring Ji Tianxing relaxed their vigilance when they saw that he had not left his room for several days. No one had entered the house either. Right at this moment, 3 indistinct phantoms appeared in the night sky thousands of meters away. The 3 shadows drilled into the ground and moved stealthily in the depths of the earth. They quietly crept towards the house without causing any sound or aura. A short while later, the 3 shadowy figures snuck into the old house from underground. They spied on the situation in the courtyard. When they saw Ji Tianxing meditating in the room, they simultaneously took out a pitch-black compass and used some kind of secret technique. Swish, swish, swish. Chapter 1490. No one knew what treasures the 3 pitch-black compasses were. However, the cage of black light had sealed off the entire house, making it impossible for anyone to see what was going on inside. Swoosh, swoosh. Two indistinct shadows emerged from the ground and appeared in Ji Tianqing's bedroom. The two of them unleashed their fastest speed and used their most powerful killing moves to attack Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! Swoosh! A pitch-black sword radiance and a dark golden saber radiance pierced towards Ji Tianqing's forehead and heart respectively. All of this happened in a split second. It was so fast that no one knew what to do and how to block it. The sword radiance and the saber radiance were about to pierce Ji Tianqing. At this critical moment, he suddenly opened his eyes, revealing a cold and sharp gaze. His entire body lit up with a dazzling golden light, which condensed into a dark golden mana shield. Bam! Bam! The saber radiance and the sword radiance pierced him at the same time, creating two loud, dull sounds. The dark golden dermic power shield was shattered on the spot, and Ji Tianqing was also sent flying by the terrifying impact. The violent force exploded and hit the surrounding walls. Cracking sounds could be heard as half of the house collapsed from the tremors, sending rubble and tiles flying all over the place. Ji Tianqing fell into the house. His eyes flashed like lightning, and only then did he see his surroundings clearly. He saw that there was a pitch-black void in all directions. It was at least a dozen miles in radius. In this mysterious void, only this house existed. He instantly realized that this pitch-black void must be the domain space of the two assassins. Not only did they want to assassinate him, but they also wanted to do it without anyone noticing. Damn it! The Holy Emperor and the spies of various forces are secretly monitoring this house. Someone actually dares to assassinate me? Ji Tianqing's face was very gloomy. His eyes flashed with cold murderous intent. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, a dazzling cold light suddenly appeared in the pitch-black void behind him. Swish! It was a blazing white sword light that was 10 meters long. It was incomparably sharp and contained an invincible and terrifying might. When the sword light appeared, it was only a few dozen feet away from Ji Tianqing. At such a close distance, he had no time to dodge or block, and was directly pierced by the sword light. Boom! With a muffled explosion, he was sent flying by the sword light and smashed into the half-collapsed house. Dust and gravel flew everywhere, obscuring the sky. The entire house trembled violently. Cracks appeared on the ground, and the house collapsed completely, turning into ruins of bricks and stones. At the same time, a third blurry figure appeared in the dark void. This was a tall and skinny man wearing black leather armor. He wore a black iron mask on his face, revealing only a pair of eyes that were as sharp as swords. Both of his hands were covered in black gloves, and each of them held a black thin sword that was about 4 feet long. After his attack succeeded, he did not take advantage of the situation to attack. His figure turned into nothingness and hid in the void. At this moment, Ji Tianqing flew out from the rubble. Swoosh! He flew above the rubble and stood in midair. His expression was cold as he scanned his surroundings with a sharp gaze. He looked somewhat wretched. There were 2 holes in his white robe, with rags hanging from them. His hair was also a little disheveled. However, he was not injured. There was only a fist-sized dent on his back that was faintly oozing blood. It was the result of the third assassin's attack. He had been stabbed in the back. Thankfully, his body had been tempered to an extreme, and his defense was extremely strong, allowing him to block the strike. Otherwise, the strike would have pierced through his body. He frowned as he looked coldly at the 2 figures 1,000 feet away. There are a total of 3 black-robed assassins. 2 of them are at the 7th Firmament Essence Soul Realm. The strongest assassin is hiding in the darkness. He is also the most dangerous. He seems to be at the 8th Firmament Essence Soul Realm. Damn it! Who sent the 3 of them? In a short moment of contact, he could tell the strength of the 3 assassins. With his strength, he would definitely not be able to withstand the attacks of the 3 assassins. He might very well lose his life here tonight. At this thought, his expression turned gloomy and his mood turned heavy. Suddenly, the 2 black-robed assassins attacked. In a flash, they appeared in front of him and joined forces to assassinate him. Swoosh! The 2 of them brandished their sabers and swords at the same time, attacking Ji Tianqing from both sides. The assassin on the left brandished his saber and slashed out 9 dark golden saber beams. They sealed off Ji Tianqing's escape route, leaving him with nowhere to run. The assassin on the right unleashed 8 cold beams of light with all his strength, stabbing towards Ji Tianqing's vital points as if they could pierce through everything. The 2 assassins cooperated with each other very well. They were flawless and had no blind spots. Ji Tianqing was caught in a dilemma. He could not dodge and could only use all his strength to resist. Dharma body of heaven and earth. He bellowed with a thunderous voice. Golden light surged out from his body as he pushed his physical defense to the limit. Immediately, a vast and mighty power poured into his body, causing his skin, flesh, and blood to turn a dark gold color, shining brightly. A black light flashed in his palm. He took out the sword of burial of heaven and slashed out more than 10 sword beams. Bam! 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 The blazing white sword beams collided with the incoming saber beams and sword beams. A series of dull sounds rang out. Instantly, all of the sword lights were shattered, exploding into pieces that covered the sky and covered the earth, splashing out in all directions. Only the 9 dark golden saber beams were left. They hit Ji Tianqing hard and drowned his figure. Another dull sound rang out. He was sent flying by the saber beams and smashed into the void thousands of feet away. With his current strength, he was weaker than any of the assassins. There was no way he could withstand the combined attacks of the 2 assassins. However, this was not the most dangerous thing. The truly deadly assassins had been hiding in the dark all along. When he was sent flying, the 3rd black-robed assassin finally appeared. Sky gap flowing light. The skinny black-robed assassin appeared 200 feet away from Ji Tianqing. He waved a pair of thin black swords as fast as lightning and drew out a dazzling white light. That dazzling white sword light was like a bolt of lightning tearing apart the night sky, but also like a streak of light tearing apart the sky. Its power was unparalleled. It seemed to be able to cut through all obstacles and defenses. In just a third of an instant, the dazzling white light arrived in front of Ji Tianqing and was about to hit him. If he was hit by this sword beam, he would be seriously injured even if he did not die. At this critical moment, a golden light suddenly lit up behind him. A pair of dark golden wings appeared. Swoosh! A pair of wide golden wings immediately wrapped around his body, protecting him firmly. Bam! With a dull bang, the white light slashed the golden wings, splashing out a blazing white light that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Chapter 1491. At the edge of the void, there was a pitch-black barrier of light. Ji Tianqing violently crashed into the wall, causing a loud bang sound. When he bounced back, the 3rd assassin's figure had disappeared into the darkness once again. The 2 assassins joined forces and attacked Ji Tianqing together. They were assassins and only wanted to kill their target as soon as possible. They didn't want to waste time and didn't want to engage in a pointless battle of words. Swish swish. In the blink of an eye, the 2 assassins arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. They waved their swords and sabers and attacked him from both sides. In their eyes, it was already a miracle that Ji Tianqing could survive until now. Even if he didn't die, he would be severely injured. Under such circumstances, Ji Tianqing definitely wouldn't be able to defend against their attacks. However, just as their attacks were about to land on Ji Tianqing quickly spread his golden wings and slashed out a dazzling sword light with the burial of heaven. Heaven-cleaving sword. He used all of his strength and slashed out a blazing white sword light that was hundreds of meters long. It exploded with an unstoppable force. Only a gotcha sound could be heard as the huge sword shattered a few saber lights and fiercely chopped at a black-clothed assassin. The assassin was sent flying. Blood spurted out of his chest and splattered into the dark void. He flew for thousands of meters before landing in the dark void. His body twitched in pain and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. There was a wound that was about half a foot long on his chest. It was so deep that the bone could be seen. Blood was gushing out of the wound. The other assassin saw that his companion had been injured and his body trembled. He revealed an incredulous expression. Just as he was in a daze, Ji Tianqing used his ultimate technique, God Concealment Step. His figure disappeared into the darkness. His God Concealment Step was more profound and exquisite than the 3 assassins' concealment techniques. The 3 assassins' concealment techniques had to rely on the dark void to be completely hidden. However, there were still some flaws. Ji Tianqing had completely disappeared. Even the aura of his primordial spirit had become difficult to detect. The 3 assassins couldn't detect his tracks at all. They couldn't determine his location. Damn it! This person has also mastered a concealment technique? His concealment technique seems to be even more profound than ours. We can't detect his aura at all, And we can't find any trace of him either. How are we supposed to act? Quick, use the shadow compass and cast a spell to lock onto his aura. The 3 black-clothed assassins were scattered in the void. They maintained their stealth state vigilantly, secretly communicating with each other through divine sense. The 3rd assassin was the strongest, and his stealth technique was the most exquisite. He hid in the void without moving an inch, waiting for Ji Tianqing to appear again so that he could unleash a thunderous attack. The other 2 assassins hurriedly cast spells to activate the shadow compass and search for Ji Tianqing's aura. At this moment, a dazzling cold light suddenly shone behind the injured assassin. Piercing sword. Following Ji Tianqing's cold shout, the cold light ruthlessly pierced the black-clothed assassin and exploded inside his body. Boom! A thunderous explosion sounded, and a dazzling white light soared into the sky like a mushroom cloud. The black-clothed assassin's body, as well as his black clothes and soft armor, exploded into pieces that flew in all directions. Crimson blood, mixed with countless pieces of flesh, scattered in the dark void. A ball of dazzling white light flew out from the debris in the sky, and hurriedly fled to a dark corner. Damn it! Our intelligence was wrong. This person's strength is even greater than his performance in the arena. That dazzling white light was the origin spirit of the black-clothed assassin. He angrily sent out a divine sense message to warn his 2 companions. Be careful, I'll retreat first. As he spoke, he quickly escaped from the dark cage and burrowed into the depths of the ground. In just a few breaths, he escaped from the ground and left Ji Tianqing's residence. Ji Tianqing watched the origin spirit escape with his own eyes. He wanted to intercept and kill it, but he was stopped by the other assassin. Only Ji Tianqing and the 2 assassins were left in the dark cage. The black-clothed assassin at the 7th Firmament Essence Soul Realm held a treasured saber in the open. The skinny assassin at the 8th Firmament Essence Soul Realm held a pair of thin black swords in his hands. He was still hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Ji Tianqing and the black-clothed assassin fought intensely in the void. Both of them used all their strength and used all sorts of ultimate moves. Saber flashes and sword shadows filled the sky, manifesting thousands of dermic radiances as they clashed intensely. Boom! 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 Dull thuds sounded incessantly as violent shockwaves constantly spread, filling the entire dark cage. Ji Tianqing used all sorts of ultimate moves and used the effects of divine concealment steps to force the black-clothed assassin into a retreat. His injuries were constantly worsening. However, the skinny assassin hid in the dark. He would always attack Ji Tianqing at the critical moment in a futile attempt to kill him in one strike. Ji Tianqing could only block and defend, giving up on opportunities to kill the black-clothed assassin time and time again. Both sides fought for about 100 seconds. The black-clothed assassin was covered in injuries, but he did not make a sound. He clenched his teeth and endured. The skinny assassin hiding in the dark also exerted immense pressure on Ji Tianqing. He was covered in 6 new wounds that constantly spewed dark red blood. Finally, Ji Tianqing realized that this could not go on. If he wanted to defeat the 2 assassins and escape the dark cage, he had to take a risk. Star-shattering fist. He clenched his left hand into a fist and smashed it at the black-clothed assassin, blasting out a massive dark golden fist beam. The black-clothed assassin hurriedly slashed out a myriad of saber flashes to block the fist beam. Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to brandish the Burial of Heaven, stabbing out 4 sword flashes that enveloped the black-clothed assassin's figure. On the surface, it seemed that he had unleashed his strongest strength to severely injure the black-clothed assassin. The skinny assassin hiding in the dark immediately seized this opportunity and rushed to Ji Tianqing's back like a ghost, stabbing out 4 sharp black blades. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The 4 sharp blades were pitch black like ink and cold like ice. Moreover, they were thin, narrow, and extremely sharp. The 4 sharp blades were about to stab Ji Tianqing's head, neck, back, and other vital points. But at this moment, Ji Tianqing suddenly turned around and stared at him with a murderous look. Thunder! Ji Tianqing shouted in a low voice and instantly opened the 3rd eye on his forehead. It released violent thunder and lightning, condensing into a pillar of thunder and lightning. Kaboom! In the earth-shattering explosion, the pillar of thunder and lightning struck the skinny assassin. It also reflected his eyes that were filled with fear. He was instantly sent flying by the thunder and crashed into a dark corner more than 10 miles away. The black leather armor he was wearing was also a powerful defensive artifact, but it was blasted into a pile of black debris by the thunder and lightning. The flesh and blood all over his body were charred and blurry. His body twitched violently, looking particularly miserable. Moreover, his body was in a state of paralysis, and his primordial spirit was also injured. He fell into a temporary state of dizziness, and his consciousness was somewhat fuzzy. Chapter 1492. Heaven-Splitting Sword. Ji Tianxing roared. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed with all his might. A blazing white sword light that was hundreds of feet long, shrouded in dense lightning, slashed at the skinny assassin. It was only now that the skinny assassin realized that he had fallen into Ji Tianxing's trap. Ji Tianxing was creating a diversion. His real target was him. Seeing the destructive sword light slashing down, he did not hesitate to take out a talisman and cast a spell to detonate it. Boom! A ball of dazzling yellow light exploded, forming a huge mushroom cloud, enveloping his figure and blocking the sword light descending from the sky. With a deafening sound, the earthen yellow light splashed out, illuminating the entire dark prison. The sword light that was hundreds of feet long was also blocked. Its power gradually weakened and finally dissipated in the void. After the light dissipated, the skinny man's figure disappeared. He hid in the void again and silently treated his injuries. Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven and looked around with sharp eyes. At this moment, the black-clothed assassin, who was covered in wounds, suddenly rushed out of the darkness and slashed at his back with his saber. Ji Tianxing frowned. His eyes flashed with a cold light, and his body surged with killing intent. "You're courting death." He suddenly swung the sword of burial of heaven and slashed with all his strength. Cold Sea. The icy blue sword light that was hundreds of feet long slashed at the black-clothed assassin and sent him flying. He spat out a mouthful of blood and smashed into the void in the distance. A huge wound appeared on the assassin's waist and abdomen. Blood kept gushing out. Ji Tianxing's figure flashed and chased after him. He swung his left fist and punched. Star-shattering fist. Bam! The black-clothed assassin did not have time to block and was hit by the huge fist. His body that was full of wounds was immediately smashed in half by the fist and was as flat as paper. His body finally could not bear the burden and was destroyed on the spot. Swoosh! A streak of azure light flew out and expanded violently. In the blink of an eye, it became a gigantic beast that was over 1,000 feet tall. This giant ice-blue beast looked like a ferocious giant ape. It had a huge head, long arms, and wide palms and legs. Its entire body was burning with icy blue flames, and its pair of scarlet eyes flashed with an ominous glint as if it wanted to devour someone. Clearly, this was the primordial spirit Dharma power of the black-robed assassin. After his body was destroyed, he didn't choose to run away. Instead, he tried his best to kill Ji Tianxing. Roar! The icy blue giant ape opened its bloody mouth and let out a furious roar. It waved its palms and shot out icy blue light beams toward Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing hurriedly used Divine Concealment Step and quickly teleported away. At the same time, his body lit up with golden light as he summoned his golden primordial spirit sword. Shwa! A giant golden sword that was thousands of feet tall appeared in the void behind him, illuminating half of the dark cage. Slash! Ji Tianxing stood proudly in the air. He pinched his fingers together and controlled the giant golden primordial spirit sword to slash at the icy blue giant ape. Bang! Bang! The icy blue light pillars that filled the sky were all shattered, and a series of muffled sounds rang out. The icy blue giant ape wanted to cast another spell, but the golden primordial spirit sword had already slashed its shoulder and sent it flying. A huge gap appeared on its broad and majestic shoulder on the spot, and countless blue light fragments burst out. Slash again! Ji Tianxing waved his right hand, and the golden primordial spirit sword shone even brighter. It slashed at the icy blue giant ape again with even more power. The icy blue giant ape was enraged. It waved its arms desperately, and blue light covered the sky to block the attack of the golden sword. At this time, the skinny man had already treated his injuries. He took the opportunity to attack Ji Tianxing from behind. He waved his sword and shot out 19 black blades. Whoosh! 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 Each black blade contained a cold aura of death. Not only were they extremely sharp, but they could also counter the power of the primordial spirit. He thought that Ji Tianqing's primordial spirit had already flown out, and he was at his weakest. However, he didn't expect that Ji Tianqing was already prepared. Just as the dozens of pitch-black swords were about to pierce Ji Tianqing, a golden light flashed behind his back, and a pair of broad wings wrapped around him. Bang! 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 The black blades hit the golden wings, and a series of muffled sounds rang out. Ji Tianqing's body trembled, and his golden wings flashed with golden light. However, the 19 pitch-black swords were shattered into pieces, and Ji Tianqing was unharmed. The skinny assassin gritted his teeth when he saw this, but he could only hide in the darkness and continue to look for a chance to sneak attack. After a while, Ji Tianqing controlled the golden primordial spirit sword to beat up the icy blue giant ape. Countless wounds and cracks appeared on its body. The icy blue giant ape could collapse at any moment and be completely slain by Ji Tianqing. However, Ji Tianqing stood in the void, his aura constantly rising. His dermic powers were also steadily increasing. He constantly waved his hands and pinched his fingers, controlling the golden primordial spirit sword to attack the icy blue giant ape. Furthermore, he was frantically accumulating his strength, taking the opportunity to break through to the fifth firmament essence soul realm. His white robes fluttered in the wind, and his long hair fluttered in the wind. Around him, dark golden halos lit up one after another, flashing with resplendent brilliance. At that moment, he was no longer as wretched as before, when he was pincered by the three assassins. His body was tall and strong, and his aura was domineering. His entire body emanated a powerful and mysterious aura. The icy blue giant ape sensed that his aura was surging. It felt an increasing sense of danger, and it was anxious, but there was nothing it could do. The skinny man hiding in the darkness also noticed something. He immediately revealed a look of shock as he exclaimed inwardly, "Heavens! This darn bastard is trying to break through to the fifth firmament essence soul realm in the middle of battle? How is this possible? How can he be so confident and bold? How can he break through at this moment?" Everyone knew that there was an 80 to 90% chance of failure when a warrior attempted to break through a realm bottleneck. The chances of success on the first try were extremely small. Once the breakthrough failed, they would expend too much dermic powers and enter a temporary state of weakness. In a weakened state, a warrior would find it difficult to use dermic powers, leaving them with only 20 to 30% of their combat strength. Therefore, almost all warriors would choose to enter seclusion in a chamber if they wanted to break through to the next realm. It was extremely rare and dangerous for someone like Ji Tianqing to break through in the middle of a dangerous battle. As long as he failed to break through, it was equivalent to certain death. There was no chance of survival. Yet he had chosen to do so. No. I can't allow him to continue his breakthrough. With his current strength, he can already fight me to a draw. If he succeeds by chance and breaks through to the fifth firmament essence soul realm, I'm afraid I won't be his match. After the skinny man calmed down, he charged at Ji Tianqing without hesitation and attacked with all his might. 10,000 blades in a single strike. He released his most violent dermic powers as he brandished his sword, sending out cold stars that enveloped Ji Tianqing's figure. Chapter 1493. Swish! 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 Thousands of cold stars rained down from the sky. Even a 100,000-foot-tall mountain would be reduced to ruins by the cold stars, reduced to dust. However, just as the dense cold stars were about to hit Ji Tianqing, they were blocked by the golden wings. Ding! 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 A series of crisp sounds rang out, as though metal had struck metal. The wide pair of golden wings protected Ji Tianqing very tightly. After withstanding thousands of cold stars, the golden wings had lost more than half of their power and had dimmed significantly. Swoosh! The golden wings disappeared and turned into a wide golden cloak that draped over Ji Tianqing's back. He was safe and sound, and his circulation had not been interrupted. His dermic powers and aura were still rising rapidly, reaching an even higher peak and limit. Seeing this, the skinny assassin was so anxious that he gritted his teeth. The icy blue ape could not be bothered with that. It was already cracking under the onslaught of the golden essence soul sword and was desperately trying to escape. In just 3 short breaths, a strange change occurred. All of a sudden, a muffled sound exploded from Ji Tianqing's body. It sounded like a clap of thunder from the 9 heavens. A dazzling golden light surged out from his body and rushed into the sky. The entire darkness cage was illuminated by the dazzling golden light, revealing every detail. A sacred and mighty aura burst out from his body and spread out in all directions, enveloping a radius of more than 5 kilometers. His flesh and skin shimmered with a dark golden light. His 108,000 pores opened and released a powerful aura. At that moment, he had his eyes closed and his arms wide open with a calm expression, as though he was hugging the sky. His long hair and golden cloak fluttered as his body emitted a sacred golden light. The aura and bearing that belonged to a peerless genius and a supreme expert was perfectly displayed on his body. His strength and aura were more than 3 times stronger than before, becoming as vast and unfathomable as the sea. Upon seeing this scene, the skinny assassin and the icy blue ape were shocked. They found it unbelievable. They could not believe that Ji Tianqing had successfully broken through. In less than 15 minutes, he had broken through the martial Dao bottleneck and reached the 5th firmament essence soul realm. This was simply inconceivable. After coming to their senses, the shock in the hearts of the 2 assassins dissipated, replaced by despair. Despicable little bastard. He actually succeeded. It's over. He has broken through to the 5th firmament essence soul realm and his strength has increased 3-fold. Even I am no match for him. The plan is going to fail. This thought flashed through the thin assassin's mind, and he immediately thought of retreating and decided to quietly escape. He was an elite assassin who would do anything to complete his mission, including sacrificing the lives of his companions and brothers. However, he would always remember that the most important thing for an assassin was to remain calm and rational. Even though he knew that it was impossible and that his plan was going to fail, he would not sacrifice his life for nothing. After all, he was only an assassin who was ordered to kill, not a loyal and courageous death warrior. Shwa! The lean assassin's figure disappeared into the darkness. He quietly retreated to a dark corner, wanting to leave the dark prison. But at that moment, Ji Tianqing opened his eyes and turned to look at him. That pair of deep and boundless pitch-black eyes clearly revealed a disdainful sneer, as well as a dense killing intent. Although the lean assassin was invisible, he felt like he was being stared at by Ji Tianqing, as though he had been seen through. Oh no! His body trembled as his expression changed. He hurriedly sped up to escape to a dark corner. However, it was already too late. Shwa! Ji Tianqing's figure flashed as he teleported more than 5 kilometers away. He came to the lean assassin's side and blocked his path. The lean assassin bellowed with a ferocious expression. He frantically brandished his sword, sending out hundreds of sword flashes. Go to hell! Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a contemptuous sneer. He struck out with heaven-capturing palm with his left hand, while his right hand sent out a dazzling cold beam with his sword. Boom! There was a crisp explosion as the dazzling golden heaven-capturing palm collided with the hundreds of sword flashes, shattering into pieces. On the other hand, the cold light from the Heaven Barrier sword pierced through the thin assassin's body and exploded inside his body. Bam! A dazzling cold beam exploded in the dark void, like a mushroom cloud rising into the sky. The lean assassin's body exploded into pieces of flesh and blood that splattered in all directions. In the rain of blood, a black shadow flew out and was about to escape from the dark cage. However, Ji Tianqing had been waiting for his primordial spirit to appear. He hurriedly waved his left hand, sending out a golden divine flame. God-slaying spear. The mysterious and turbulent golden flames instantly condensed into a 10-foot-long golden divine spear. It pierced the black shadow with a loud bang. With a dull explosion, the black shadow was shattered by the golden divine spear. It turned into wisps of black light that dissipated into the void. The lean assassin, who was at the 8th firmament essence soul realm, was killed by Ji Tianqing just like that. In the dark prison, only he and the giant ice snow ape were left. The giant ice snow ape had witnessed the death of the lean assassin with its own eyes. It was scared out of its wits and was filled with despair. When Ji Tianqing flew towards it, it knew that it could not escape and that it would definitely die. Therefore, it wanted to self-detonate its primordial spirit Dharma power. Phew! The giant ice snow ape's body swelled violently as it flashed with blue light. Its aura also became extremely violent and chaotic. Upon seeing this, Ji Tianqing's expression changed as he frowned deeply. He did not hesitate to control the golden sword and split it into tens of thousands of sword flashes. Soul-slaying. The tens of thousands of golden swords formed a huge sword net that enveloped the giant ice snow ape as it tried to kill it. The sword flashes tore through the air and filled the sky with golden flashes. The giant ice snow ape was immediately torn apart by the sword flashes, turning into tens of thousands of pieces. The giant ice snow ape's self-detonation was stopped in time, and its primordial spirit dharma power was completely destroyed. It was completely dead. The dark prison quietened down as the flashes of light and the intense storm gradually subsided. Ji Tianqing put the golden sword back into his body and held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands as he looked coldly at the edge of the darkness. He slowly raised the sword of burial of heaven as the Dhamma power in his body circulated wildly. His aura was also raised to its peak. He wanted to use a sword that could split the heavens and earth to break the seal of the dark prison. However, just as his aura was at its peak and he was about to swing his sword down, bam! A dull sound suddenly came from the darkness in front of him. Ji Tianqing was startled. He furrowed his brows in confusion. Then, there was another muffled bang. A big hole was blasted in the dark cage from the outside. Kacha kacha. Shattering sounds could be heard as the huge dark prison quickly disintegrated, turning into black light fragments that dissipated. With a flash of light, Ji Tianqing left the darkness and returned to the ruined house. Before he could take a good look at his surroundings, a familiar voice rang in his ears. Chapter 1494. This voice was filled with astonishment and disbelief. Ji Tianqing subconsciously frowned as he looked towards his left with a cold expression. 20 steps away, a tall and skinny figure wearing a snow-white robe entered his eyes. Without a doubt, this person was Wu Quebec. He held onto the yin-yang umbrella as he looked at Ji Tianqing in astonishment. His eyes shone brightly. Behind him stood two middle-aged men with cold expressions and powerful auras. The two of them had reached the 9th tribulation realm, but they were very respectful towards Wu Kei as if they were his bodyguards. Ji Tianqing glanced at Wu Kei as he asked coldly, "Why are you here?" Wu Kei replied without hesitation, "You were attacked, so this young master naturally had to come and take a look. I didn't expect you to still be alive. This is really surprising." Ji Tianqing stared at him with a sharp gaze as he said in a low voice, "You seem to be a little disappointed that I didn't die?" "No, no, no." Wu Kei hurriedly waved his hands as he said with a smile, "What are you saying? I can't even wait to be happy. How can I be disappointed? You can't be suspecting that this young master sent someone to assassinate you, right?" Ji Tianqing didn't say anything as he stared at him calmly. Wu Kei's expression became a little unnatural. He seemed to be a little sullen and angry as he snorted coldly, "Humph! If this young master sent someone to kill you, why would I appear personally? Wouldn't I be walking right into a trap? With your intelligence and wisdom, how could you not understand such a simple principle?" Ji Tianqing didn't reply as he cupped his hands towards him and said, "Thank you." Wu Kei was stunned as he immediately stopped trying to defend himself. A warm smile appeared on his face. "That's more like it. At least you have some eyesight. This young master didn't worry for nothing." After saying that, he flew towards the ruins beside Ji Tianqing as he searched around with his sharp eyes. The entire residence had been reduced to rubble and dust. Even the surrounding buildings within 1,000 feet had been destroyed by the shockwave, turning into ruins. Wu Kei rummaged through the ruins for a while, and he soon found the assassin's corpse, armor fragments, and a few broken pieces of metal. He picked up the broken pieces and carefully observed them for a while before returning to Ji Tianqing's side with a solemn expression. "Young Master Ji, you're in big trouble now." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and looked at him calmly. "What do you mean?" Wu Kei glanced around and saw that there were many black shadows around. It was obvious that many spies had sensed the abnormality and were secretly observing them. Therefore he used telepathy to explain to Ji Tianqing, "The person who tried to assassinate you should be an assassin from the Hidden Killer Pavilion." "Secret Killer Pavilion?" Ji Tianqing looked puzzled as he asked in a low voice, "I've never heard of this force. They have no grudges with the Hidden Assassin Pavilion. Could this be an assassin organization?" "That's right." Wu Kei nodded and said, "They are the strongest assassin organization in our country. They have many strong cultivators, and 1,000 years ago, they even tried to assassinate a martial saint." Hearing his explanation, Ji Tianqing's expression darkened. He said in a cold voice, It seems like someone secretly paid a huge sum of money to hire an assassin from the Hidden Killer Pavilion to assassinate me. That's right. Xueqi nodded and said in a playful tone, "You've just arrived and have no grudges with the major forces in our country. However, you offended some geniuses during the ranking battle. You must have stolen someone's honor and ruined his future, which is why you're in trouble now." Ji Tianqing immediately recalled the words Lan Yiqing had said before he left the arena after being defeated by him, as well as the look of hatred in his eyes. His expression was cold as he said in a proud tone, "I had no intention of blocking anyone's path, and I didn't want to have anything to do with the forces of the Yun Empire. Since that person wants to kill me, then bring it on. What do I have to fear?" Xueqi looked at him with burning eyes. He sighed and said, "Young Master Ji, I can't help but admire you. You're really confident and domineering. However, I have to remind you that you can't afford to offend the Hidden Killer Pavilion or that other force." Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a cold smile, but he didn't reply. Xueqi saw that he didn't take it to heart, so he hurriedly advised, "Young Master Ji, you really can't underestimate the Hidden Killer Pavilion and the Lan family. They are the top forces in our country. Although you escaped a calamity tonight and even killed 2 assassins, you were just lucky. You live in the Imperial City and are being watched by the various forces. The Hidden Killer Pavilion sent an Essence Soul Realm assassin to assassinate you in order to hide their actions. After all, once a 9th Tribulation Realm expert approaches this area, his aura will be detected and the Imperial family will be alerted. Only an Essence Soul Realm assassin won't be noticed and will be more convenient to assassinate you. If the Hidden Killer Pavilion sends a 9th Tribulation Realm assassin next time, will you still be able to survive unscathed?" Ji Tianqing naturally knew that his analysis was very reasonable. He nodded and said, "Thank you for the reminder. However, you don't have to worry too much. The Hidden Killer Pavilion's assassination plan has failed. This matter will definitely be known by the Imperial family and the various large forces. In the short term, the Hidden Killer Pavilion and that other force will definitely not dare to act rashly unless they dare to disregard the Sage Emperor's authority. In 3 days, we will leave the Yun Empire and head to the Clear Sky Pagoda. Would they dare to chase us to the Clear Sky Pagoda?" Xueqi was stunned for a moment, then he nodded slightly in agreement. "Not bad. Your analysis is very reasonable. However, you still can't let your guard down. You still have to be extra careful in these 3 days." After saying this he thought for a moment, then said sincerely, "Young Master Ji, why don't you come back with me and stay for a few days? 3 days later, we will go and meet the Divine Envoy together. There is a manor in the south of the city. It is my private territory. Other than the Imperial family, no other force will dare to invade." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then asked hesitantly, "Now that I am in the eye of the storm, aren't you afraid of getting into trouble?" Xueqi revealed a confident smile and said proudly, "Other than the Imperial family, I am not afraid of the other forces. They also won't dare to offend me easily. As for the Sage Emperor, I will personally explain it to him. You can rest assured." Ji Tianqing nodded and cupped his hands, saying, "If that's the case, many thanks." Xueqi's smiling face became even more charming. His eyes shone brightly. It was obvious that he was in an extremely good mood. After that, he brought Ji Tianqing and left the ruins. Under the escort of 2 middle-aged guards, they quickly rushed to the south of the city. Their figures disappeared into the night. After everyone left, many experts and secret agents who were hiding in the dark came to the vicinity of the ruins. They quietly investigated the situation. These people found some fragments and quickly left the ruins, disappearing into the darkness. In a short 2 hours, more than 10 groups of secret agents and experts investigated the ruins and found many clues. After 6 hours, a long night had passed and a new day had arrived. Chapter 1495. Although the Imperial family and the other major forces could find out that the assassin who killed Ji Tianqing was from the Hidden Killer Pavilion, the Hidden Killer Pavilion was powerful. However, the Hidden Slayer Pavilion was very powerful. Their connections in the Yun Empire were deeply rooted. Furthermore, the Hidden Killer Pavilion was very secretive and had many experts in charge. No one was willing to offend the Hidden Killer Pavilion. Even the Imperial family would not start a war with the Hidden Killer Pavilion for Ji Tianqing. Anyway, Ji Tianqing was not dead and he would leave the Chu Yun Empire in 3 days. No one wanted to cause more trouble. Just like that, the matter was left unsettled. The hidden killer pavilion did not send any more assassins and the mastermind did not make any further moves. Of course, the hidden killer pavilion had offended the Sage Emperor by looking down on him. They would definitely be suppressed by the Sage Emperor in the future. The eyes of the various forces were focused on Wu, Quebec. His mansion in the south of the city had become the focus of attention. Many forces were guessing that Wu must have a motive for being so close to Ji Tianqing. As for the imperial family, there were also rumors from the imperial palace. It was said that on the second morning of the incident, Wu personally went to the imperial palace to meet the Sage Emperor and had a long talk with him. No one knew what they talked about. Everyone only knew that in the next 3 days, Ji Tianqing stayed in Wu's mansion and did not show his face. The Sage Emperor did not express any opinions on this matter and seemed to have silently agreed. 3 days passed quickly. On this morning, when the sun rose from the east, countless citizens had gathered in the city square. There were at least 300,000 people gathered in the spacious square and were discussing with anticipation. Today was the day of the arrival of the Clear Sky Pagoda's messenger. The 15 young geniuses were also going to leave the Chu Yun Empire and head to the Clear Sky Pagoda. Almost all the citizens knew that the Clear Sky Pagoda was the holy land of martial arts and the place where the Divine Master taught. It had a revered and holy status. No one had seen the Clear Sky Pagoda with their own eyes and had never bathed in its divine light. However, everyone knew that every time the messenger of the Clear Sky Pagoda arrived in the imperial city, it would bring along a sky full of divine light. Under the envelopment of the divine light, flowers fell from the sky and green lotuses surged from the ground. There were even thousands of rays of multicolored light and thousands of strands of auspicious qi. Any martial artist who had been baptized by the divine light would have a cleansing effect. Their martial aptitude would be even more outstanding, and their comprehension talent would also increase accordingly. All in all, this was a miracle that only happened once every 20 years. It would bring great benefits to the people. Therefore, every time the divine envoys arrived at the imperial city, it would cause a huge commotion. As time passed, the morning sun gradually rose into the sky. More and more citizens rushed over from all directions and gathered around the square. The huge square was surrounded by people, and not even a drop of water could trickle through. As far as the eye could see, it was packed with people. The number of people present today was even more than the number on the day of the ranking battle, reaching almost 600,000. In the middle of the square, there were already over 100 people lined up in an orderly formation on the arena that was 1,000 feet above the ground. They were all standing respectfully. They were the civil and military officials of the Chu Yun Empire and the 15 young geniuses. Not long after, Great Emperor Chu Yun, the Holy Master, and the 8 nobles also stepped onto the stage and stood in front of everyone. The arena was silent. Everyone's faces were solemn, and their hearts were filled with anticipation. The 600,000 citizens in the square also remained silent. They looked up at the sky with excitement and waited in silence. When the sun was high in the sky, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the southern sky. It was a belt of dazzling golden light. It was as fast as lightning, and it streaked across the sky toward Heavenly Cloud City. The hundreds of thousands of citizens in the square immediately burst into cheers of joy. "Look, the divine envoys have arrived. We've waited for 20 years. We can finally see the divine envoys again. I've been shackled for more than 10 years. I hope that today, I can bathe in the divine light and successfully break through." The cheers rose and fell, and they converged into a torrential sound wave that reverberated through the sky. On the arena, Ji Tianqing, Wu Kei, and the dozen young geniuses all turned their heads to look at the southern sky. Their eyes were filled with anticipation. Wu Kei stood beside Ji Tianqing. Seeing Ji Tianqing's calm expression, Wu Kei transmitted a message to remind him, "Mr. Ji, when the godly light descends, you must focus on refining it. It will be extremely beneficial." Ji Tianqing only nodded slightly and didn't say anything. In the blink of an eye, the dazzling golden light flew into the imperial city and arrived above the square. Instantly, the sun in the sky was blocked out. Half of the imperial city was enveloped by the divine golden light. Heaven and earth were filled with dazzling light, and the air was filled with extremely dense heaven and earth spirit qi. Within the golden light and clouds, there was a sacred and solemn guard of honor. More than 100 guards in golden armor, each of them handsome and heroic. They held golden halberds in their hands and had treasured swords at their waists. They looked very dignified. There were also over 100 young and beautiful maids, dressed in exquisite dresses, holding all kinds of musical instruments, playing the beautiful sounds of nature. 100 guards and 100 maids clustered around a luxurious golden carriage. The golden carriage was more than 100 feet wide. It was gilded with gold and inlaid with tens of thousands of precious gems and divine jades. Its design was extremely exquisite and beautiful. Without a doubt, this was the carriage of the Clear Sky Pagoda's envoy. It was a symbol of his prestige and extraordinary status. The sage emperor looked up at the golden carriage in the sky and saluted first. He bowed and shouted, "Welcome to Heavenly Cloud City, divine envoy." As the sage emperor's voice fell, the sage emperor, the civil and military officials, as well as the hundreds of thousands of commoners, all knelt on the ground and kowtowed respectfully. "Welcome to Heavenly Cloud City, divine envoy." The uniform shouts converged into a deafening torrent of sound waves that resounded through the clouds. The sage emperor maintained a bowing posture. The civil and military officials, as well as the hundreds of thousands of commoners, also maintained a kowtowing posture. They were very sincere. The golden carriage high in the sky gradually lit up with dazzling rainbow-colored divine light. A tall and burly figure walked out of the golden carriage and stood on the golden auspicious cloud. This person wore a purple robe with dragons and phoenixes carved on it. The lapel of the robe was embroidered with the pattern of stars, sun, and moon. He looked very noble. He was a middle-aged man with a dignified face. He had a beard and a golden crown on his head. His temperament was dignified but elegant. He had the ethereal aura of an otherworldly expert. Obviously, he was the envoy sent by the Clear Sky Pagoda to receive them. He looked down at the entire square from above. His eyes swept over the civil and military officials, the 15 young geniuses, and the hundreds of thousands of commoners. His voice was loud and solemn as he said, "Clear Sky is virtuous. It benefits the common people. It enlightens and nourishes all living things." He chanted some kind of sacred incantation. His hands slowly unfurled a dark golden scroll. Suddenly, a rainbow-colored divine light gushed out of the scroll. It poured down like a torrential flood and enveloped the entire square. The area completely turned into a world of golden light. Hundreds of thousands of people were bathed in the divine light. Their bodies were undergoing subtle and mysterious changes. Their strength and talents were also rapidly increasing. Chapter 1496. Under the cover of the vast heaven divine light, half of the city, with the plaza as its center, became a world of dreams. The sky and the ground were filled with dazzling and colorful scenes. Life flourished and spirit chi surged, transforming into a dense 7-colored spirit mist that swept out like a tide. The hundreds of thousands of people prostrated on the ground, intoxicated as they devoured the divine light. They enjoyed the refreshing feeling of bathing in the spring breeze. Their spirits and complexions became energetic and high-spirited. Their bodies underwent minute changes, and their talent and potential were also imperceptibly rising. Originally, there were many old and weak people in the crowd, as well as martial artists who were heavily injured. Under the baptism of the divine light, those white-haired and elderly people quickly regained their spirits, and their weak vitality became much stronger. The injured and sick people also rapidly recovered from their injuries, and their illnesses quickly disappeared. Everyone had benefited greatly, and their hearts were filled with respect and gratitude for the vast heaven divine Lord, and they supported him immensely. Even the civil and military officials on the stage, as well as the 10-some young geniuses, were silently growing stronger and more talented. Ji Tianqing, Yin Wuk, Lan Yiqing, Kuang Long, and the others all closed their eyes, silently circulating their energy to refine the energy of the divine light. Ji Tianqing's body was suffused with a golden light, and he was rapidly devouring the divine light. His talent and comprehension were also imperceptibly rising. To everyone's surprise, the heaven-mending pearl that had fused with his origin soul was also actively devouring the divine light. This way, the divine light and 7-colored spirit mist in a radius of several thousand feet all surged into his body like rivers flowing into the sea. He was like a bottomless pit, madly devouring the world's spirit chi and divine light. His speed was several dozen times faster than the other geniuses. The golden divine light and seven-colored spirit mist danced around him, forming a seven-colored vortex that was extremely dazzling. The surrounding geniuses and civil and military officials were all immersed in the baptism of the divine light. Suddenly, everyone sensed that the divine light and spirit qi had become thinner, and they opened their eyes in confusion. Then, they saw Ji Tianqing surrounded by a seven-colored vortex, which was madly devouring the divine light and spirit mist. Everyone was immediately dumbfounded, and they all revealed expressions of disbelief as they stared at him in shock. The 8 nobles, saint masters, and saint emperors were also alarmed. They all turned their heads to look at him with strange expressions. After a while, the young genius and the civil and military officials came to their senses and glared at him, their hearts filled with anger and dissatisfaction. Lan Yiqing and the other young geniuses, in particular, looked at him coldly with hatred and murderous intent. After all, he alone had devoured about 80% of the divine light and spiritual mist in the arena. The other geniuses and civil and military officials also wanted to use this rare opportunity to greatly improve their talent and strength. Now, 80% of the divine light and spiritual energy had been snatched away by Ji Tianqing. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd and the oracle watching from the sky, no one could stop Ji Tianqing, nor could they fly elsewhere to devour the divine light. Everyone could only suppress their anger, maintain a respectful attitude, and devour the remaining 20% of divine light and spiritual energy with all their strength. After a while, the purple-robed oracle on the golden auspicious cloud noticed the abnormality in the arena. He frowned as he looked at Ji Tianqing, who was in the crowd. When he saw the seven-colored vortex, a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. Ordinary people did not know that the clear sky divine light that the purple-robed oracle had released came from the mysterious scroll in his hand. It was a divine artifact, the clear sky diagram, which was made by the divine master Taihao himself. It was a divine artifact that was made to educate and nurture the people. When the purple-robed oracle activated the clear sky diagram and released the clear sky divine light, it would cover half of the city and benefit millions of people. It would also benefit the people equally. Other than the martial sages, no one could monopolize the spiritual qi and divine light. The martial sages were basically the saint emperors and saint masters of the various empires. They would not disregard their status and snatch the divine light. Therefore, Ji Tianqing's situation was extremely rare. The purple-robed oracle had controlled the clear sky diagram for more than 1,000 years. He had only encountered such a situation once, and it was 800 years ago. The person who could monopolize the divine light and spiritual qi was a peerless genius with the abyss body. He was born with the ability to devour all kinds of spiritual qi and spiritual qi. Now, the genius with the peerless treasure body had long become a martial saint whose name had shaken the world. That person sat in the clear sky pagoda and was the great guardian. Thinking of this, the purple-robed oracle's pupils constricted and a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. A peerless genius is going to appear in the small Chu Yun Empire? Although he was an expert who had cultivated for more than 1,000 years, his state of mind was as still as water and he did not show his emotions on his face. However, at this moment, his heartbeat sped up and his eyes shone brightly. He stared at Ji Tianqing as if he wanted to see through Ji Tianqing. However, Ji Tianqing was immersed in cultivation. His primordial spirit and spiritual qi were increasing rapidly, and he did not see the change in the oracle's expression. Unknowingly, 100 breaths had passed. The purple-robed oracle slowly put away the clear sky diagram of the 9 heavens. The divine golden light that covered the sky gradually faded and disappeared. Hundreds of thousands of citizens were still kneeling on the ground, immersed in the subtle changes in their bodies. On the stage, the sage emperor, sage master, and civil and military officials said in unison, "Thank you, Oracle, for your blessing. May the glory of the clear sky divine Lord be eternal." As they shouted, everyone bowed and kowtowed. The purple-robed oracle nodded with a dignified expression. Standing on the golden cloud, he raised his hands and said, "You may rise." Then, he looked at the Chu Yun Emperor and asked in a serious tone, "Sage Emperor, where are the 15 young geniuses selected by your empire?" The Chu Yun Emperor turned slightly and pointed at Ji Tianqing, Xueqi, and the others. The 15 young geniuses stood in a row and bowed to the purple-robed oracle. The purple-robed oracle's gaze swept across Lan Yiqing, Xueqi, and the others before landing on Ji Tianqing. "Young man, what is your name?" Ji Tianqing replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Ji Tianqing. The purple-robed oracle raised his eyebrows and nodded. I'll remember you. If I'm not wrong, you should be the #1 genius of the Chuyun Empire, right? Ji Tianqing did not say much and only nodded calmly. The purple-robed oracle revealed a benevolent smile and said, as expected. Seeing this scene, the civil and military officials were all shocked. They felt that it was unbelievable. The esteemed oracle actually ignored the other geniuses and spoke to Ji Tianqing with a benevolent attitude. What did this mean? Even an idiot would know. The dozen young geniuses instantly clenched their fists and secretly looked at Ji Tianqing with envy and jealousy. Chapter 1497. It was a great honor to be noticed by the god's messenger in front of so many people. Moreover, the god's messenger had spoken to Ji Tianqing in a friendly manner. Everyone understood that this was the god emissary's appreciation for Ji Tianqing. The hundreds of thousands of citizens were shocked. The officials were envious. The sage emperor and the sage master looked at each other and smiled proudly. Only a few young geniuses had ugly expressions. Their hearts were filled with hatred and jealousy. Lan Yiqing's aura became colder. She stared at Ji Tianqing with a gaze as sharp as a knife. She thought to herself, damn it! Even the god's messenger favored him and thought highly of him. And all of this originally belonged to me. Ji Tianqing. One day, I will kill you with my own hands. I will trample all your glory and pride under my feet and trample on them wantonly. Xueqi, who was standing beside Ji Tianqing, also looked at him with a complicated expression. His eyes were as bright as gems. This young master's eyes have never been wrong. From the first time I saw him, I knew that he was extraordinary. As expected. He is so dazzling no matter where he is. Not only does the sage emperor think highly of him, but even the god's messenger is impressed. It's a pity that he is too cold and arrogant. Otherwise, I would have tricked him back to the Flower Moon Palace. It was not only Lan Yiqing and Yin Wuke. Everyone in the arena had their own thoughts. Not long after, the god's messenger and Emperor Chuyun finished talking. The god's messenger cupped his hands at Emperor Chuyun and said solemnly, Sage Emperor, I am here to welcome the geniuses of your country. Time is of the essence, so I will not stay any longer. With that, he waved his sleeves and shot out a dazzling flame. It poured down from the sky and extended to the arena. The dark red flame immediately formed a staircase that connected the arena to the golden clouds. Heroes, come on up. The god's messenger's voice came from the sky. Ji Tianqing took the lead and walked towards the fiery red staircase. He followed the staircase and walked towards the golden auspicious clouds in the sky. Lan Yiqing, Yin Wuke, and the rest followed closely behind him and stepped onto the staircase. After a while, everyone stepped onto the golden clouds and entered the golden chariot. The golden chariot looked very luxurious. The interior was also very spacious. It could fit at least dozens of people. Ji Tianqing, Lan Yiqing, and the rest gathered in a room that looked like a big hall. They sat in 2 rows on both sides of the hall. Other than the 15 of them, there were only the god's messenger, a few maids, and guards in the golden chariot. Not long after, hundreds of maids began to play music, and the guard of honor set out on their journey. The golden clouds, the golden chariot and the guards, they flew across the sky. In a short span of 10 breaths, the golden cloud disappeared into the horizon. On the square, the civil and military officials, as well as the hundreds of thousands of people, were still immersed in joy and excitement, whispering to each other. Inside the golden chariot, in the grand hall, Ji Tianqing and the other prodigies sat on the golden floor. Some cultivated silently, while others rested with their eyes closed. Everyone knew that the journey from Heavenly Cloud City to the Clear Sky Pagoda was very long. During this time, no one was allowed to move around. They could only stay in the hall. The god's messenger didn't show himself either. He stayed in his personal room. No one knew what he was doing. Ji Tianqing closed his eyes and thought to himself, I've finally left the Chuyun Empire. Emperor Chuyun, the Hidden Killer Pavilion, and the Lan family won't be able to do anything to me. After all, no one dares to attack the god's messenger's guards. Once I reach the Clear Sky Pagoda, I have to find Yao Yao as soon as possible. He remembered that Yun Yao had only fused with 2 Neptunian divine pearls. She only had a few years left. He had to find Yunyao as soon as possible and help Yunyao find more Neptunian divine pearls. Only then could he extend her life. At that moment, a voice transmission rang out in his head. Young Master Ji, it looks like the enmity between you and Lan Yiqing can't be resolved. She clearly hates you to the core. She won't stop until you die. Especially after the god's messenger asked for your name. Lan Yiqing almost exploded in anger. She kept staring at you as if she wanted to eat you alive. The person who transmitted the voice was Flawless Yin, who was sitting beside him. Ji Tianqing opened his eyes instinctively and met Lan Yiqing's cold and sharp eyes. Lan Yiqing was sitting across from him, only 10 steps away. Her cold eyes were as sharp as swords and filled with hatred. Ji Tianqing glanced at her expressionlessly and indifferently, then closed his eyes and continued to rest. In Lan Yiqing's eyes, his reaction showed that he was looking down on her and didn't care about her at all. Her face grew colder and colder. Her entire body radiated with cold air, turning the entire hall into an icy cavern. Unparalleled shame and anger almost exploded out of him. However, she quickly regained her senses. She tried her best to suppress the killing intent in her heart and slowly retracted her extreme cold air. This slight change couldn't escape the senses of the young geniuses. Everyone secretly observed Lan Yiqing and Ji Tianqing. They all laughed coldly in their hearts and took pleasure in their misfortune. Flawless Yin transmitted his voice again. Although you've left the Chu Yun Empire and are about to go to the Clear Sky Pagoda, you don't have to worry about the hidden killer pavilion and the Lan family's assassination attempts. However, Lan Yiqing will definitely do everything in her power to kill you. Ji Tianqing was still as calm as ever as he transmitted his voice to him. So what? She's just a loser. I don't care about her anymore. If she dares to try to assassinate me again, I will definitely take her life. Again. Flawless Yin was startled. He explained in a low voice. Young Master Ji, to be honest, the Lan family must have ordered the assassins from the hidden killer pavilion to assassinate you. I think this has nothing to do with Lan Yiqing. She has a proud personality and doesn't care about such things. Even if she wanted to kill you, she would do it herself. She wouldn't use the hands of assassins. Ji Tianqing was silent for a while. Then he asked, isn't the result the same? If I die, she will have achieved her goal. No, you don't understand. Flawless Yin explained again. Lan Yiqing is a very stubborn person. She is also a crazy person who can't be reasoned with. If not for that, she wouldn't have been able to endure 20 years of cruel cultivation and torture to reach her current strength. You have to understand that if a woman is ruthless, there is nothing a man can do. Ji Tianqing thought that since he had nothing to do, he started to chat with him. You seem to know Lan Yiqing very well? Of course. Flawless Yin said without hesitation. She was born in the Eternal Night Glacier. She is the apple of the Eternal Night Martial Monarch's eye. She is the most outstanding descendant of the Lan family. I am the young master of the Flower Moon Palace. The Flower Moon Palace and the Eternal Night Glacier have been enemies for a long time. I am also Lan Yiqing's enemy. For the past 10 years, my goal has been to surpass her and become the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. Chapter 1498. Ji Tianqing was puzzled and asked subconsciously, why should I give up? Yin Wu-Kei's tone was playful and helpless. He smiled and said, Lan Yiqing has already become the #2 genius, and you, the #1 genius, are too monstrous. Obviously, he knew that his talent was not as good as Ji Tianqing's and that he had no hope of becoming the #1 genius, so he gave up. Ji Tianqing said calmly, you are smart. Yin Wu-Kei rolled his eyes at him. You are really annoying sometimes. Humility is a virtue. Why can't you be more gentle and elegant? You will definitely have more friends. Ji Tianqing did not reply and changed the topic. What is your goal now? Yin Wu-Kei replied without hesitation. To become friends with you and help you change your arrogance, coldness and other flaws. Sorry, I don't know you. Ji Tianqing replied calmly. Yin Wu-Kei was so angry that he rolled his eyes. His eyebrows twitched and his thin lips trembled. You are really annoying. I shouldn't have cared about you. Ji Tianqing was silent for a while before he said calmly, if you were more masculine and less feminine, maybe we could be friends. Xueqi's anger dissipated and he said, Flower Moon Palace is the #1 female sect in the country. There are 800 servants and 49 disciples. All of them are women. I grew up in Flower Moon Palace and have always been dressed like this. How can you blame me? Ji Tianqing was stunned for a while before he said sincerely, I see, then you are really pitiful. Xueqi was not angry. Instead, he smiled and said, Why should I be pitiful? Aren't you envious? Don't all men like to be surrounded by flowers? The maids and disciples of the Flower Moon Palace were all one in a million beauties, each with their own unique characteristics. Graceful, gentle, virtuous, lively. There are even bold and unrestrained ones, there are all kinds. If there is a chance in the future, I will bring you back to Flower Moon Palace and you can choose from thousands of beauties. Are you tempted? Have I treated you well enough? Ji Tianqing didn't answer. He just looked at him calmly. Xueqi looked straight into his eyes. He could only see that his eyes were clear and deep. His gaze was cold, without a trace of desire. Even if Ji Tianqing did not say a word, he understood Ji Tianqing's attitude. He suddenly felt a little embarrassed and guilty. He hurriedly explained, Cough cough. Young Master Ji, please don't take offense. I was just joking. Only then did Ji Tianqing withdraw his gaze and continue to close his eyes to rest as he sent a voice transmission to ask, Tell me about the vast heaven pagoda. Xueqi was also happy to change the topic, and hurriedly explained, I have always set becoming a god disciple as my goal, so I have some understanding of the Clear Sky Pagoda. The Clear Sky Pagoda was the place where God Lord Taihao imparted the Tao, as well as the sacred land of martial arts for the 6 great empires. It was located at the border between the Azure Dragon Empire and the White Knight Empire, atop the sacred Mount God Bestowment. Every 20 years, the various great empires would select 10 to 20 young geniuses and send them to the vast heaven pagoda to undergo guidance and training. The hundreds of young geniuses would have half a year of training and preparation time. After half a year, the vast heaven pagoda would conduct an assessment. The geniuses who successfully passed the assessment would become honorary god disciples. Every honorary god disciple is equivalent to a disciple of the Divine Lord Taihao. They have the qualifications to learn the Divine Lord's techniques, insights, array diagrams and so on. The status of a god disciple is extremely revered, and their future achievements are limitless. They have a high chance of becoming a martial saint, or at the very least, a 5 tribulation martial lord. As for the geniuses who are eliminated, they can only be sent to the divine nations in the 9 heavens and become their servants. Ji Tianqing silently listened to Xueqi's words. He thought to himself, half a year of preparation is actually not that significant to the young geniuses at the primordial spirit realm. Even if they could cultivate in the vast heaven pagoda, it would be very difficult for them to increase their cultivation by 1 level in half a year. I reckon that only the top geniuses of the various empires can become god disciples. As for the title of 5 Tribulation Martial Lord, he understood after thinking for a bit. On the Shenwu continent, primordial spirit realm warriors were called powerhouses. Powerhouses who had reached the tribulation stage were called martial lords. Those who had undergone 2 heavenly tribulations were called 2 tribulation martial lords. Those who had undergone 5 heavenly tribulations were called 5 tribulation martial lords. As for martial saints above the tribulation stage, they were often called great emperors. They were very few in number, and were usually emperors or sage masters who controlled empires. Even though Xueqi's eyes shone brightly when he talked about the god disciples, he seemed very excited and expectant. However, Ji Tianqing was not interested in divine servants or god disciples. He only thought about how to find Yun Yao after entering the vast heaven pagoda. Next, he chatted with Xueqi for a while and asked him about the vast heaven pagoda. It was a pity that Xueqi did not know much. After a few hours, the two of them calmed down and silently cultivated. Unknowingly, a month had passed. The Golden Cloud carried the Guard of Honor and the Golden Carriage, crossing half of the Outcloud Empire and half of the Blue Dragon Empire before finally arriving at Mount God Bestowment. This was the border between the Blue Dragon Empire and the Day-Night Empire. Within a radius of a few million miles, there were endless mountain ranges. It was afternoon, and the sky was blue. The sun was bright but not scorching hot. A gentle breeze blew through the sky, and the ground was covered with undulating mountain ranges. There were many majestic mountain peaks. Almost every mountain peak was more than 10,000 feet tall, and its peak was covered by clouds. It was hazy and indistinct. The mountain peaks were covered with dark green primitive forests, which released extremely dense green with spiritual energy and vitality. At the foot of the mountains, there were a few large rivers that looked like jade belts. They meandered and flowed, and the surface of the rivers sparkled with golden light. In front of the golden cloud, about a few hundred miles away, there was an enormous black mountain that was 40,000 feet tall. It was the most majestic and precipitous mountain within a radius of a few million miles. It occupied a radius of 1,000 miles, and it was like a pillar that supported the heavens and the earth. This mountain peak was where the vast heaven pagoda was located, the legendary Mount God Bestowment. The Mount God Bestowment was extremely steep, and its surroundings were almost perfectly straight, as if it had been cut by the sword of a deity. On the entire mountain, there was almost no dark green forest or vegetation. Ancient brown rocks were exposed, and they were covered with traces of the vicissitudes of life. Halfway up the mountain, they were covered by a vast expanse of white clouds. The peak of the 40,000 feet tall Mount God Bestowment was a flat land with a radius of 100 miles. It was like a place where deities preached, and also like an altar used to cast spells. The area of this place was comparable to a majestic city, and it could accommodate millions of people. However, there was no majestic city at the peak of the mountain. There were only dozens of magnificent palaces, and they were clustered around a golden divine pagoda that reached the clouds. Chapter 1499. The sacred and majestic vast heaven pagoda seemed to connect heaven and earth. The heaven and earth spiritual energy within a radius of several million miles all converged over invisibly, pouring into the vast heaven pagoda. The Bodhidharma was surrounded by a vast white sea of clouds, while the surroundings of the vast heaven pagoda were thick seven-colored spirit fog. Still separated by 100 miles, Ji Tianqing and the rest could see that there were flocks of snow-white immortal cranes flying in the sky above the Bodhidharma. There was even a series of low beast roars and dragon roars that came over. Ji Tianqing could determine based on the sounds that there were definitely many spirit beasts, even divine beasts, reared inside the Bodhidharma. Before long, the golden auspicious cloud flew above the Bodhidharma and landed on a spacious plaza. The plaza with a radius of 10,000 feet, the ground was paved with grayish-white boulders, engraved with many mysterious and profound patterns. This kind of boulder material was incomparably hard. Furthermore, it had the effects of gathering spirit, setting up formations, and so on. The north, south, east, west, 4 directions of the plaza towered 4 enormous black stone tablets. On them were rows of large golden characters that lit up, writing all sorts of information. 6 dark golden palaces towered around the plaza. Each palace had 3 floors, reaching several tens of meters tall, the aura majestic and dignified. The golden auspicious cloud dispersed. The purple-robed divine envoy and the 15 young geniuses walked out of the golden carriage in succession. The maidservants and guards clustered around the golden carriage, swiftly leaving the plaza. There were only 16 people left in the plaza. The 15 young geniuses stood in a row, silently sizing up the surrounding scene. The purple-robed divine envoy stood in front of everyone and said with a dignified expression, "Everyone, welcome to Lord Divine Master's Bodhidharma, the vast heaven pagoda. Let me introduce myself. This envoy is surnamed Lin, named Dowie. I'm one of the vast heaven pagoda's 6 great divine envoys, in charge of liaising with the Outcloud Empire's matters. In the future, when everyone cultivates here, you can consult this envoy if you have any questions." Ji Tianqing and the dozen over young geniuses cupped their hands and bowed to Lin Dowie one after another. Lin Dowie pointed to the 6 palaces around the plaza and introduced. These 6 palaces are respectively named Outcloud Palace, White Knight Palace, Azure Dragon Palace. The 6 palaces correspond to the 6 great empires. That Outcloud Palace will be your residence for the next half a year. During this 6 months, you will receive the best treatment, the most abundant resources, and the guidance and teaching of the Oracle. You must seize the time and opportunity to improve your strength as much as possible. Because half a year later, your fates will change. The strong would obtain glory and walk towards an even more glorious peak. The weak will be eliminated and become slaves of the God Nation. They will lose their freedom and status and accept an unknown fate. The expressions of the young geniuses changed slightly when they heard this. Some people's eyes were solemn, and worry flashed in their eyes. Some people had firm gazes, as if they had made up their minds. There were also a few people whose eyes were shining with excitement and anticipation. Lin Dowie calmly swept his gaze across the crowd and said in a dignified tone, "That's all I have to say. Everyone do your best. Now, all of you can go to Chuyun Palace to rest. I will inform you if there is anything else." With that, Lin Dowie turned around and left. Everyone watched as he left the square. Only then did they look away and walk toward Chuyun Palace. The magnificent Chuyun Palace was guarded by guards outside the gate, and there were many maids inside the palace. The entire palace could be said to be magnificent. There were carved beams and painted rafters everywhere, and it was built with gold and jade. Everyone stayed on the first floor of the palace. Everyone had their own room. There was a bedroom, a living room, a study, and a secret room. They even had 2 maids. After Ji Tianqing entered his room, he asked the 2 maids to leave. He meditated and cultivated alone in the secret room. Ever since he left the Chuyun Empire, he had been cultivating the sword Soul Dao and comprehending the 6th move of the 9 swords of the Burial of Heaven. To become an expert that could look down on others, it was not enough to rely on outstanding talent and aptitude. One had to cultivate harder than others. Wu Kei, Lan Yiqing, and the rest were the most outstanding young geniuses in the Chuyun Empire. They were also experts in the primordial soul realm. Everyone was like Ji Tianqing. After entering their rooms, they focused on cultivating. They did not want to waste any time. In the evening, in the palace of the Chuyun Empire, the simple and elegant imperial study was silent and peaceful. The afterglow of the setting sun shone through the window into the study, and happened to shine on Emperor Chuyun. He leaned against the luxurious throne and closed his eyes to rest. At this moment, the door of the study opened. Following a series of light footsteps, a white-robed sage master walked into the study with a golden book and a black brush. He came before Emperor Chuyun and bowed. Reporting to the sage emperor, "I'm here to report." Emperor Chuyun opened his eyes and asked unhurriedly, "Have you done what I asked you to do?" The sage master nodded and said in a serious tone, "I've already made the arrangements. In 3 days at most, the news will spread to the various countries. The royal families and top forces will know about it." Emperor Chuyun nodded slightly and revealed a satisfied smile. "That's good. Let's wait and see." The sage master hesitated for a moment before saying, "Sage Emperor, I still have something that I don't understand. Please enlighten me." Emperor Chuyun raised an eyebrow and said in a dignified tone, "Speak." The sage master's tone was solemn as he said, "A month ago, when Ji Tianqing used that mysterious black sword on the arena, you already noticed some clues. Later, you personally went out of the palace to see him. After seeing that sword, you were able to confirm that it was the legendary sword of the Burial of Heaven. The Burial of Heaven was Kenshin's personal sword, and it was the #1 divine sword in the entire Shenwu continent. Ever since Kenshin had fallen, the Burial of Heaven had mysteriously disappeared. Countless powerhouses and organizations had searched for it for thousands of years, but to no avail. For a long time, there had been a legend circulating throughout the Shenwu continent. Whoever obtained the Burial of Heaven would be able to find Kenshin's tomb. That divine sword was the key to opening Kenshin's tomb. Kenshin's tomb not only contained Kenshin's relics, but also Kenshin's lifetime of absolute arts and divine inheritance. If one could inherit Kenshin's absolute arts and divine path, they could become the second Kenshin. When he mentioned the legend of Kenshin and the Burial of Heaven, the sage master's expression became solemn. His tone was filled with excitement and reverence, and his deep eyes flickered with a bright light. It was obvious that he revered Kenshin and the Burial of Heaven greatly. 1,000 years have passed, and the Burial of Heaven has finally reappeared in this world, but it has fallen into the hands of a nameless brat. What a waste of such a treasure! Sage Emperor, why didn't you kill Ji Tianqing and take away his Burial of Heaven? Instead, you allowed him to obtain first place and smoothly enter the Clear Sky Pagoda? Although he made up a story and hinted that he was related to the Clear Sky Pagoda, those words could not deceive us. He was just a commoner with no background. If you wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as flipping your hand, and there wouldn't be any trouble. The #1 divine sword that had shaken the entire continent had actually fallen into the hands of a nameless brat, which made the sage master very angry. Chapter 1500. The Sage Master's status was transcendent, and he always had a sage-like demeanor. At this moment, he was truly enraged, and his emotions were quite agitated. One could imagine how much of a psychological impact the news of the burial of heaven and the secrets of Kenshin's tomb had on him. Emperor Chu Yun waved his hand at him, indicating for him to calm down. Then, the emperor revealed a meaningful sneer and slowly explained, "That's right. It's precisely because Ji Tianqing possesses the burial of heaven that I indulged his arrogance and personally went to see him. I even allowed him to head to the Clear Sky Pagoda. The burial of heaven is not only a peerless divine weapon, but also the key to Kenshin's tomb. It's truly the world's #1 divine weapon. I'm not the only one who wants it. All the emperors of the various empires and the top powers of each country covet it. Even the 3 divine masters want to obtain the burial of heaven and uncover the secrets of Kenshin's tomb. After all, Kenshin is the #1 genius since ancient times, and his martial arts talent is unprecedented. All the powerhouses in the world, including the 3 divine masters, worship and respect him greatly. Most importantly, Kenshin is the only one who has ascended in the past 30,000 years. He's the only one who has the method to ascend." After hearing Emperor Chu Yun's words, the sage master nodded in agreement and said with some excitement, "That's right. Ever since the end of the Great War of the Gods, this world has been sealed by the gods. The continents are not connected to each other, and even martial gods are unable to ascend. The world is shrouded in invisible shackles. Only Kenshin from 1,000 years ago managed to break through the shackles and ascend to the higher realms. He then became the God King who ruled the heavens. He's the pride of our Shenwu continent, and he's also the person who brought hope to the entire continent. If we obtain the burial of heaven, we can find Kenshin's tomb and obtain Kenshin's inheritance, as well as the method to ascend to the higher realms." "Saint Emperor, you know better than this old man how important the sword of burial of heaven is. Why did you let Ji Tianqing leave with the divine sword?" The smile on great Emperor Chu Yun's face became more and more playful as he said in a low voice, "That's right. I've always dreamed of obtaining the sword of burial of heaven. But now was definitely not the time." The ranking battle of the god disciples that day had caused a sensation in the entire imperial city. Ji Tianqing had become famous after the battle and was now being targeted by various superpowers. It's easy for me to kill him and seize the sword of burial of heaven, but who can guarantee that the news won't leak out? If someone were to recognize the sword of burial of heaven, wouldn't everyone know that the sword of burial of heaven was in his possession? Moreover, once I obtain the sword of burial of heaven and open Kenshin's tomb, there will definitely be a heavenly anomaly. At that time, the 6 great empires would be in an uproar, and this matter would spread throughout the world. The empires and countless experts would crazily fight for the sword of burial of heaven and find Kenshin's tomb at all costs. The Chu Yun Empire and I would be in an extremely dangerous situation. Hearing this, the sage sovereign had already guessed his thoughts. He nodded silently and said, "That's right. The sword of burial of heaven contains Kenshin's inheritance and the secret of ascension. It's enough to make everyone go crazy." Great Emperor Chu Yun's expression became more and more solemn as he said in a low voice, "For hundreds of years, the 6 great empires have been fighting both openly and secretly, trying to annex and eliminate each other. Our Chu Yun Empire's strength is only ranked 5th among the 6 great empires. Our foundation is very weak. Once the other 5 great empires know that the sword of burial of heaven is in my possession, they will definitely do everything they can to fight for it and seize it. At that time, how can we resist the 5 great empires who are like wolves and tigers? I'm afraid that we won't be able to protect the sword of burial of heaven at all. Even the entire Chu Yun Empire will be destroyed in the flames of war. Therefore we must not be hasty." The sage sovereign finally understood and nodded. "I see. The sage sovereign is indeed far-sighted. This old man understands now. Although the sword of burial of heaven is a peerless divine weapon and contains enormous secrets, it's also a hot potato, a fatal poisonous blade. No matter who obtains the sword of burial of heaven, they will become the target of public criticism and be besieged by various countries' powerhouses and various major forces. The sage sovereign allowing Ji Tianqing to go to the vast heaven pagoda is to divert the disaster away, so as to not implicate our Chu Yun Empire. You also made this old man release the news of the sword of burial of heaven, wanting the 5 great empires to make a move to snatch it one after another and fight each other for the sword of burial of heaven. At that time, you can reap the benefits and truly obtain the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Only after the sage sovereign finished speaking did Great Emperor Xueqi nod his head slightly, revealing a hint of a sinister sneer. That's right. A wise person must plan well before taking action, and also have to be far-sighted and predict the future. A month has passed. Presently, Ji Tianqing should have arrived at the vast heaven pagoda. The news of the Sword of Burial of Heaven has also been released. This emperor believes that after the 5 great empires receive the news, they will quickly rush to the vast heaven pagoda and try to snatch the Sword of Burial of Heaven. However, no matter who obtains the Sword of Burial of Heaven in the end, they will be besieged from all sides, and even bring about the destruction of their countries. We only need to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. As he spoke, Great Emperor Xueyan's eyes flickered with a cold light, and he sneered sinisterly. When the 5 great empires are fighting each other to the death in order to snatch the Sword of Burial of Heaven, it will be the best time for this emperor to make a move. At that time, not only will this emperor obtain the Sword of Burial of Heaven, but I will also unify the 6 great empires and become the #1 great emperor under the Divine Master. The sage sovereign is wise. With such a grand strategy, you will definitely achieve your wish. The sage sovereign hurriedly bowed and flattered sincerely. However, after he finished speaking, he frowned and thought for a while. He still asked worriedly, "Sage sovereign, could that brat Ji Tianqing have already found Kenshin's tomb? If he didn't obtain Kenshin's inheritance, how could he be so monstrous?" Great Emperor Xueyan shook his head and said confidently, "Kenshin is the #1 god since ancient times. How could his tomb be found by an ordinary person? With that brat Ji Tianqing's strength and knowledge, it's impossible for him to find Kenshin's tomb. Moreover, he actually took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven in front of hundreds of thousands of people in the arena. This means that he doesn't know the secret of the Sword of Burial of Heaven and Kenshin's tomb. This damned fool doesn't understand what the Sword of Burial of Heaven means at all. Such an ignorant person actually obtained the Sword of Burial of Heaven. The heavens are truly blind." The sage sovereign was also filled with indignation. He nodded in agreement and said, "That's right. How glorious was Kenshin when he was alive. Not only was he worshipped by hundreds of millions of martial artists, but he also suppressed 3 martial gods with 1 sword. He was truly unparalleled and heroic. I didn't expect that today, 1,000 years later, Kenshin's sword would actually fall into the hands of a foolish brat. It's truly a pity that a bright pearl is covered in dust." The corner of Great Emperor Xueyan's mouth twitched, and he revealed a confident and domineering sneer. He said in a low and forceful voice, "The Sword of Burial of Heaven will belong to me one day. The territories and people of the other 5 empires will also submit to me." The sage sovereign looked at him with a determined gaze and said solemnly, "I will do my best to assist the sage sovereign and unify the 6 empires." Chapter 1501. The peak of Mount God Bestowment was as peaceful as ever. The clear sky pagoda gathered the spiritual energy of heaven and earth from millions of miles away, making the peak as beautiful as a fairyland. In a short 5 days, the young geniuses from the various empires arrived one after another under the guidance of the divine envoys and stayed in the various palaces. The dozen or so young geniuses from the Xueyan Empire had been cultivating in the Xueyan Palace and rarely showed themselves. During this period, Lin Daoyi also did not come to the Xueyan Palace. Ji Tianqing cultivated in the secret chamber for 5 days and his strength improved imperceptibly. Unfortunately, he still could not fully comprehend the 6th sword imparted by the Burial of Heaven. The 9 swords of the Burial of Heaven were incomparably mysterious. Only those who had reached the deity realm could fully grasp it and unleash its greatest power. With Ji Tianqing's strength, it was already not easy for him to master the first 5 swords. As for the 6th sword, he would probably have to wait until he reached the peak of the primordial spirit realm before he could comprehend and grasp it. Early in the morning, Ji Tianqing was meditating in the secret chamber. Suddenly, a maid's clear voice sounded from outside the secret chamber. She reported, "Young Master Ji, Divine Envoy Lin Daoyi has come to visit. Please come quickly to meet him." Ji Tianqing, who was in the middle of cultivation, was immediately awakened by the maid's voice. He quickly ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. He muttered to himself, "Lin Daoyi actually came to find me alone? I came to the Clear Sky Pagoda as the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. Logically speaking, I should receive the best treatment and resources. Could it be that he came for this matter? Ji Tianqing silently analyzed and felt that it was very possible. After all, he had been in the Clear Sky Pagoda for several days but had not received any resources or rewards. He got up and walked out of the secret chamber with a trace of anticipation. A maid was guarding the door of the secret chamber. When she saw him come out, she hurriedly bowed. "Young Master Ji, please follow this servant." Then, the maid led him through the corridor and the living room, and into the elegant study. When they reached the door of the study, the maid stopped and stood guard outside. Ji Tianqing stepped into the study and saw Lin Daoyi standing by the window, silently looking at the clouds outside. Ji Tianqing greets Divine Envoy Lin. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and greeted Lin Daoyi. He then asked, "I wonder why Divine Envoy Lin has come to find me?" Hearing this, Lin Daoyi turned around and looked at him with bright eyes, revealing a kind smile. "Ji Tianqing, I naturally have something important to discuss with you. Follow me to a place. Someone wants to see you." Ji Tianqing frowned and asked in confusion, "May I ask who wants to see me?" Lin Daoyi smiled and shook his head. "You don't have to ask. Follow me and you will know." Seeing how mysterious he was, Ji Tianqing was even more puzzled. But he didn't ask any more questions. He followed Lin Daoyi out of the study and left Chu Yun Palace. The two of them passed through the plaza outside the palace and walked towards the Clear Sky Pagoda in the distance. After a while, the two of them walked to the bottom of the Clear Sky Pagoda and stopped outside a dignified and sacred palace. This palace was very exquisite and beautiful. It was more imposing and dignified than the other palaces. It was also the palace closest to the Clear Sky Pagoda. Outside the wide gate, which was 10 feet tall, there were 99 white jade steps. There were 200 guards wearing golden armor standing guard. 2 huge statues stood on both sides of the gate. One was a divine dragon, and the other was a qilin. Ji Tianqing could vaguely guess that the people who lived in this palace were either divine envoys of the Clear Sky Pagoda or protectors with a higher status than divine envoys. Lin Daoyi brought him to the palace gate and stopped. He smiled and said, "Ji Tianqing, I can only bring you here. You can go in by yourself." Ji Tianqing nodded his head at him and was about to stride into the great hall. Lin Daoyi hesitated for a bit, then transmitted his voice and exhorted, "You have to remember, be more respectful to that little lord. You absolutely can't offend her." Ji Tianqing's footsteps paused for a bit, feeling increasingly puzzled in his heart. But he did not ask any more. He lifted his foot and stepped into the great hall. It was only to see that inside the spacious great hall with a radius of 1,000 feet, it was a scene of splendor and splendor. The ground was paved with enormous golden bricks. There were a total of 18 pillars on both sides of the great hall. They were all vermilion with gold and carved with dragons and phoenixes. On the walls around the great hall, there were all kinds of mountains and rivers, scenes of the sun, moon and stars, as well as some mysterious and ancient relief sculptures. The dome was inlaid with hundreds of millions of gemstones, akin to a vast sea of stars, emitting a bright brilliance, illuminating the entire great hall down to the finest detail. Ji Tianqing crossed the great hall and walked towards the north. There was a 90-foot-tall platform there, on which was a spacious throne. On the left and right sides of the throne, there were 2 valiant female guards in silver armor, each holding a dark golden halberd in their hands, looking majestic and awe-inspiring. And that spacious and luxurious gilded throne was like a crescent moon. The design was very exquisite and gorgeous, exuding a sacred and noble aura. When Ji Tianqing saw this throne clearly, he felt that it was somewhat familiar, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. "This throne, seems like I've seen it somewhere before." This thought popped up in his mind, and he fixed his eyes on the throne. He saw that on the spacious and luxurious throne, there was a petite and adorable figure lying on it. That's right. She was lying on her stomach, not sitting down. That was a petite little girl who was about 1 meter tall. She wore a fiery red long dress, had a head full of light golden hair, and wore exquisite and adorable headdresses. Her mouth and nose were petite and adorable, but her eyes were large and clear. Her delicate little face was filled with excitement and anticipation, as red as an apple. At this very moment, she was lying on the throne, staring fixedly at a black name list, looking exceptionally focused. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing instantly raised his eyebrows and revealed a gentle smile. Jojo, I didn't expect that. It's actually you. Without a doubt, that petite and adorable blonde little girl was the Jojo whom he had met once before. Jojo, who was concentrating on reading, was instantly startled awake by his voice. She hurriedly raised her head and turned her head to look at Ji Tianqing. When she saw Ji Tianqing's appearance clearly, she rolled and climbed up. Her little face revealed an extremely brilliant smile, and said with a heart full of surprise, Tianqing, it's really you. When I saw your name just now, I was still thinking whether or not it could be a coincidence. I didn't expect that you really came. Hee hee, you really didn't disappoint me. Not only did you participate in the God-Disciple selection, you even came to the Clear Sky Pagoda as the #1 genius of the Chuyun Empire. This is really too unbelievable. Hearing what she said, Ji Tianqing understood that the black booklet that she was flipping through was most likely the name list of the God-Disciple selection candidates. His gaze fell on the black booklet, and a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Chapter 1502. Jojo was filled with excitement. Her face was flushed red as she stared at Ji Tianqing with sparkling eyes. Others might not know, but she knew very well that Ji Tianqing was not from Shenwu continent. Moreover, 10 months ago, Ji Tianqing had not reached the primordial spirit realm. Now, he had reached the 5th level of the primordial spirit realm. Even with Jojo's status and knowledge, she could not understand such a miracle. She was extremely shocked. At this moment, Ji Tianqing deliberated for a moment. He looked at Jojo with a solemn expression and said calmly, Jojo, I believe you know that you are my only friend here. Jojo nodded hurriedly and said with a smile, Yes, yes, of course. Ji Tianqing continued, I came to the vast divine kingdom to participate in the God-Disciple selection, not to become a God-Disciple. Ah! Jojo was stunned. The smile on her face disappeared. She frowned in confusion. She stared at Ji Tianqing with her big clear eyes and asked, Tianqing, why did you participate in the God-Disciple selection? Ji Tianqing did not evade and said directly, I came to the Clear Sky Pagoda to find someone who is more important to me than my life. Jojo blinked her big round eyes and vaguely understood something. Ji Tianqing looked at her sincerely and asked, Jojo, can you help me check if there is a woman called Yunyao here? Jojo revealed an as-expected expression and asked with a smile, Tianqing, is the person you are looking for your lover? She is not my lover. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said solemnly, She is my wife. Oh! Jojo dragged her voice. She had an as-expected expression. She hurriedly held the black name list and flipped through it quickly. Ji Tianqing stared at her with burning eyes. His heart was filled with anticipation and a trace of nervousness. If Yunyao was in the vast heaven pagoda, that would be great news. If Yunyao was not here, then all his previous efforts would be in vain, and the only glimmer of hope would be extinguished. How could he not be nervous in this situation? 100 breaths later, Jojo finished flipping through the name list. She raised her head to look at Ji Tianqing and shook her head regretfully. Tianqing, this is the list of the 6 nations' geniuses, but there is no one called Yunyao on it. This news was like a bolt from the blue to Ji Tianqing. His body shook and his face stiffened. His burning eyes quickly dimmed and were filled with disappointment. Fortunately, he was mentally prepared, so he was able to withstand this blow. He pursed his lips in silence and did not lose his composure. Jojo looked at him with concern. She could empathize with his disappointment and sadness. She thought for a moment and quickly consoled him. Tianqing, don't be disheartened. This is only the list of the 6 nations' geniuses. Other than these 100 young geniuses, there are also many maids in the vast heaven pagoda. Let me help you check. Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment before shaking his head. Jojo, thank you, but there's no need. She came to the Shenwu continent 2 months earlier than me and is also a martial arts genius with outstanding talent. She definitely won't become a maid. Jojo understood and nodded. Since you are sure that Yunyao will become a god disciple of some divine nation, then she is definitely not in the vast heaven pagoda. In fact, she is most likely not in the vast heaven pagoda. Ji Tianqing suppressed the disappointment in his heart and pulled himself together. His expression returned to normal as he said with a firm tone, "No matter where she is, I will definitely find her. Jojo, I'm sorry. I'm afraid that we will have to say goodbye as soon as we meet. Yun Yao is not in the vast heaven pagoda, so there is no need for me to stay here and waste time." Jojo was shocked and asked with a frown, "Tianxing, are you in a hurry to find her now?" Ji Tianxing did not speak, but he nodded with a firm expression. Jojo quickly waved her small hand and persuaded, "Tianxing, I'm afraid that won't do. Don't be impatient and listen to my explanation. Yun Yao is not here, so she is most likely in the Heaven End Divine Nation or the Luo Shui Divine Nation. The God-disciple selection in those two divine nations has already ended. Even if you leave the vast heaven pagoda now, you will definitely not be able to make it in time. Moreover, the three divine nations are extremely vast. If you search aimlessly, how long will it take?" Hearing this, Ji Tianxing fell silent. He frowned and said nothing. Jojo continued, "Tianxing, it's not that I look down on you, but the continent is too vast and dangerous. With your current strength, it's impossible for you to cross the Shenwu continent, let alone enter the sacred grounds of those two divine nations. In addition, every divine nation has its corresponding divine laws, and the vast heaven pagoda also has its own rules. The God-disciple candidates who come here must abide by the rules of the vast heaven pagoda. How can anyone come and go as they please? Tianxing, this is the law of the divine nations. No matter how anxious you are, it's useless." Jojo's analysis was clear and logical. Logically and emotionally, it was impossible for Ji Tianxing to leave the vast heaven pagoda right now. He deliberated for a moment before asking, "Jojo, when can I leave?" Jojo looked at him with a solemn expression and said solemnly, "If you are strong enough and can stand out among the geniuses of the 6 nations, you can pass the assessment in half a year and become a God disciple. At that time, the vast heaven pagoda will select the 5 most outstanding powerhouses among the God disciples. These 5 God disciples will represent the vast heaven divine nation and participate in the exchange of the 3 divine nations. At that time, you can leave the vast heaven pagoda and exchange pointers with the God disciples of the other 2 divine nations." At this point, Jojo smiled and comforted him. "If Yun Yao's talent is outstanding and she can also become one of the top 5 God disciples, then you will be able to see her with your own eyes. Even if you can't see her, you can still communicate with the God disciples of the other 2 divine nations and ask them about your wife's whereabouts. Therefore, Tianxing, you don't have to be anxious. Wait patiently for half a year. Then you will know the results." "I see." Ji Tianxing nodded, and the worry and anxiety in his heart dissipated. He had made up his mind to cultivate diligently and work hard to improve his strength. He would strive to become one of the top 5 God disciples in half a year. Jojo saw that he had calmed down and felt much more relaxed. She reminded him again, "Tianxing, although you are the #1 genius of the Chuyun Empire, the Chuyun Empire is ranked last among the 6 nations. There are many young geniuses in the other 5 empires who are at a higher realm than you, and they will be your strong opponents. In the next half a year, you must work hard to improve your strength. You must not slack off. Otherwise, if you can't become one of the top 5 God disciples, how are you going to find her?" After she finished speaking, she waved her hand and shot out a ray of light. She sent the black register to Ji Tianxing. "Tianxing, this register is for you. It records the information of all the candidates." Chapter 1503. Ji Tianxing took the black roster and kept it in his interspatial ring. He looked at Jojo and said calmly, "Jojo, thank you. However, I would like to know why you are helping me?" Jojo gave him a radiant smile and explained, "You also said that I'm your only friend here. If I don't help you, who else can? Besides, I have my own plans and motives for helping you." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows. "What motives?" "Of course I can't say." Jojo shook her head and said with a chuckle, "Don't worry. I definitely won't do you any harm." Ji Tianxing looked at her deeply. Seeing her innocent look and her clear and bright eyes, he didn't ask any more questions. "In that case, thank you very much. Farewell." He cupped his hands at Jojo and left the hall. Not long after, he returned to his room in Chuyun Palace. He entered the secret chamber and took out the black roster. He sat down and read it carefully. There were more than 100 names recorded on the roster. They were the young geniuses from the 6 empires. Everyone's name, age, strength realm, and background were recorded on the roster. It was clear at a glance. Ji Tianxing quietly flipped through the book for an hour. He finished reading all the contents of the book and memorized a lot of important information. Among the 100 young geniuses, the weakest was at the 2nd level of the Essence Soul realm. Most of them were between the 3rd and 5th level of the Essence Soul realm. 14 of them were at the 5th level of the Essence Soul realm like him. In addition, there were 3 people whose strength exceeded his and attracted his attention. The 3 names were recorded in red. Clearly, they were highly valued by the Clear Sky Pagoda. They would definitely be heavily groomed in the future. One of them was called Song Zhanyu. He was a graceful and elegant young master. According to the roster, he was the #1 young genius of the White Knight Empire. He was also a noble prince and the 7th son of the White Knight Holy Emperor. He had cultivated martial arts for 48 years and had reached the 6th level of the Essence Soul realm. He was famous in the White Knight Empire and was revered and worshipped by hundreds of millions of young warriors. The second genius was called Jiangning Xue. She was a gentle and graceful beauty. This woman was the #1 genius of the Thousand Snow Empire. She was born in an ancient aristocratic family. It was said that her bloodline was quite noble. However, her identity and background were not recorded in detail. Only her important information was written on the register. She had cultivated in the martial Tao for 46 years and now possessed strength at the 6th firmament Essence Soul realm. Before participating in the ranking battle, she was almost unknown to the world and kept a low profile. It wasn't until the ranking war that she defeated the 2 strongest geniuses of the Thousand Snow Empire in public and became the #1 genius in one fell swoop. As far as Ji Tianxing was concerned, both Song Zhanyu and Jiangning Xue were formidable opponents. However, what he truly valued was the 3rd genius. His name was Qin Songqiong and he was from the strongest country among the 6 nations, the Blue Dragon Empire. Qin Songqiong had cultivated martial arts for 40 years and had reached the peak of the 6th firmament Essence Soul realm. He could break through to the 7th firmament Essence Soul realm at any time. Plus, this person was cold, arrogant, and overbearing. He was a proud heaven's favorite. He held the firmament blade in his hand and carried the 1,000 drunks pot all year round. He was dressed in a carefree and unrestrained manner. He used 36 moves of the firmament blade technique and his prestige in the Blue Dragon Empire was unparalleled. In Ji Tianxing's opinion, the 3 of them were all extremely talented geniuses. Among them, Qin Songqiong's skills were the most profound and the most mysterious and unpredictable. He had a premonition that Qin Songqiong would be his strongest opponent. Although in the assessment half a year later, as long as I become the top 5 god disciples, I will be able to participate in the exchange of the 3 holy kingdoms. However, who would be willing to be 2nd place? Who wouldn't want to be #1 and become the most dazzling god disciple in the vast holy kingdom? Ji Tianxing murmured softly. His fighting spirit and fighting spirit were surging in his heart. When the time came, he would definitely defeat the 3 geniuses and become #1. After a long time, he kept the register and kept it in his heart. He continued to cultivate. 2 days later, in the morning, when the sun rose, Lin Daoyi suddenly came to Chuyun Palace and ordered for the 15 geniuses to gather. The geniuses who were cultivating in seclusion walked out of their rooms and gathered in the main hall of Chuyun Palace. Everyone had cultivated in seclusion for a few days. When they met again, they realized that their strength and aura had increased imperceptibly. Seeing that everyone was present, Lin Daoyi announced in a dignified voice, "You have been in the Clear Sky Pagoda for 7 days. Today, I have gathered you to participate in the worship ceremony." When they heard about the worship ceremony, more than 10 young geniuses were interested. Some of them were puzzled and interested. Some of them seemed to know about the worship ceremony and looked expectant. Lin Daoyi introduced in a solemn tone, "This is the rule of the Clear Sky Pagoda. Every god disciple candidate who comes to the Clear Sky Pagoda has to worship the great divine master vast holy kingdom. When the time comes, you must maintain a solemn and respectful attitude. Only then can you be baptized by the Divine Master's radiance. If anyone dares to be rude and offends the dignity of the Divine Master, not only will they not be baptized, they will also be severely punished." Everyone was an outstanding martial genius. Of course, they understood the importance and sacredness of this matter. No one dared to offend the dignity of the divine master vast holy kingdom. Seeing that everyone understood, Lin Daoyi nodded his head in satisfaction and led everyone out of Chuyun Palace. Under Lin Daoyi's lead, everyone crossed the wide square and walked toward the divine palace near the clear sky pagoda. When they crossed the square, they saw groups of young experts walking out of the surrounding palaces. Those were the young geniuses of the various empires. They were all led by a divine envoy and were rushing toward the divine palace. This was the first time that Ji Tianqing, Xueqi, and the others had seen the young geniuses of the other empires. Although everyone did not show any expression, they were secretly sizing up the geniuses of the other empires and discussing secretly. Xueqi followed behind Ji Tianqing and sized up the groups with a deep gaze. Suddenly, a strange look flashed past his eyes. He transmitted his voice to Ji Tianqing. "Young Master Ji, look at the group on the left. They are walking out of the White Knight Palace. They should be the geniuses of the White Knight Empire." The black-robed youth behind the divine envoy seems to be the #1 genius of the White Knight Empire. That person's strength is not bad. He has actually reached the 6th degree realm. Ji Tianqing glanced at the black-robed youth and found that he was indeed a handsome and elegant young master. He transmitted his voice to Yin Wuk. "That is Song Zhanyu. He is one of the strongest geniuses among the candidates for the God-disciple selection. However, he is not the strongest. The group on the right is from the Thousand Snow Empire. The leader is a girl in a white dress. Her name is Jiangning Xue and she is not any weaker than Song Zhanyu. In the group in front, there is a youth in gray linen clothes and black cloth shoes. He is holding a wine jug in his hand. He is the strongest." You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.